Utah's mountains rise with breathtaking majesty, their peaks shrouded in mist and mystery. But nestled among these ancient slopes are shrines that are not just spiritual, but haunted by dark histories and shadowed rituals. Locals whisper of unexplained lights flickering at night, faint chanting drifting through the trees, and figures that move in impossible ways among the rocks and altars. Some shrines were abandoned centuries ago, yet the land remembers the rites performed there. Travelers report cold drafts, whispered warnings, and ghostly figures standing silently among the stones, watching, waiting, or repeating rituals long forgotten. Tonight, we will explore 25 of Utah's most haunted mountain shrines, where dark rituals echo through the night, shadowy figures lurk in hidden corners, and the mountains themselves seem alive with whispers from the past. Step carefully, for some shrines hold energies that will follow you home, and spirits who linger far beyond the edge of the mountain mist. High in the sandstone cliffs overlooking Moab lies a place locals rarely speak of, a weather-worn alcove known as the Red Rock Shrine. It is not marked on maps, and no official sign points toward it. Those who stumble upon it usually do so by accident, hikers wandering off trail, photographers searching for sunset vantage points, or travelers simply following the quiet pull of curiosity. What they find is an ancient, hollowed space carved into red stone, its floor smoothed by generations of footsteps and its walls etched with symbols that defy easy explanation. The shrine is small enough that a visitor can stand in the center and touch both walls with outstretched arms. Yet it feels larger within. Sound behaves strangely here. Even a whisper seems to drift upward and outward, echoing longer than it should. The air carries an odd stillness, as though the surrounding desert is holding its breath. People often say they feel watched the moment they step inside, though no one can explain why. The earliest stories about the Red Rock Shrine describe it as a gathering place for ancient cultures, a spiritual alcove for rituals connected to the land and sky. Some historians suggest it may have been a ceremonial site for observing celestial events. Others believe the chamber's design was intentional, meant to channel sound or energy in ways modern visitors struggle to interpret. Whatever its true purpose, it radiates a quiet intensity that is hard to ignore. Reports of strange activity around the shrine began decades ago. At first, they sounded like campfire tale stories hikers told to unsettle one another during long nights in the desert. But over the years, the accounts became consistent enough that even skeptical locals admitted that something about the shrine did not behave like the rest of the landscape. Many visitors report seeing shadowy figures near the alcove performing what appeared to be silent rituals. These shapes usually appear at dusk or shortly after sunset, when the sandstone glows deep red and the shadows lengthen between the cliffs. Witnesses describe the figures as dark silhouettes, human in outline but lacking detail. They stand in a loose circle, moving their arms in slow, deliberate motions, as though participating in a ceremony from a time long past. One hiker recalled walking toward the shrine during a late afternoon climb. As he approached, he noticed a group of 5 figures standing in a half-moon formation. They did not speak, nor did they make any sound at all. Their movements were rhythmic, almost graceful. When he stepped closer, the shapes dissolved into thin air, leaving the alcove completely empty. At first, he assumed he had seen shadows cast by distant trees or clouds, but the desert around him was clear. There was nothing that could have produced such silhouettes. Another account came from a photographer who visited the shrine to capture the night sky. She had set up her camera and was adjusting the lens when she noticed movement in the corner of her vision. Turning, she saw several dark, wavering shapes drifting along the back wall of the alcove. They moved in patterns that seemed too intentional to be tricks of the light. When she raised her camera to snap a photo, the shapes vanished instantly. Reviewing her footage later, she found only a brief distortion, a split-second flicker where the shadows had been. Even more unsettling are the reports of flickering lights that appear above the shrine. These lights are not connected to any campsites or flashlights and seem to rise from the stone itself. Some glow faintly like distant lanterns, while others pulse in irregular bursts, illuminating the surrounding cliffs. They hover briefly before fading into the night sky. One couple who visited the shrine described seeing 3 lights drift upward in perfect formation, pausing for several seconds before disappearing. They compared them to embers from a fire, yet no fire existed. Another visitor claimed to see a pale blue light spiral upward, twisting like smoke before vanishing abruptly. No drones were in the area, and no other hikers were nearby. The most curious detail is that these lights often appear when no one else seems to be present. Some call them energy anomalies. Others believe they are remnants of old rituals, still replaying like echoes within the stone. Visitors also describe a distinct feeling of being observed. Some say the sensation begins the moment they step into the alcove, as though unseen figures are studying them from just beyond the edges of sight. Hikers note a sudden stillness in the air, an absence of wind or natural sound. Others feel a subtle vibration beneath their feet, as if the stone itself is humming. There are no records of harm coming to anyone who visits the shrine. The place feels mysterious, even eerie, but not malicious. Instead, most describe the atmosphere as solemn, almost protective, as though the site safeguards memories of rituals long forgotten. The silent figures, the flickering lights, and the lingering energy feel less like warnings and more like reminders. The desert holds history deeper than any carved symbol or recorded story. Local residents tend to avoid speaking about the shrine, not out of fear but out of respect. They say the land remembers everything, and some places carry those memories more vividly than others. The Red Rock Shrine seems to be one such place. It absorbs stories, echoes rituals, and releases glimpses of the past to those who happen upon it. Today, hikers still stumble upon the alcove, drawn by its quiet magnetism. Some stay only a moment before retreating, unsettled by the shadows that seem to shift when no one moves. Others linger, listening to the faint hum in the stone and watching the sky above for flickering lights. Whether these experiences are echoes of ancient ceremonies or manifestations of something deeper within the desert, one thing is certain. The Red Rock Shrine is unlike any other place in Moab. It sits in silence, carved by hand and shaped by time, continuing its mysterious rituals long after its original purpose has faded. And for those who visit, the memory of its shadows and lights lingers long after they've left the red cliffs behind. Hidden within one of Zion National Park's lesser-known side canyons lies a place few visitors ever find, and even fewer return to without a story. Locals call it the Canyon Whisper Shrine, a narrow sandstone chamber tucked between towering walls where sound bends, shadows cling, and the air seems to carry memories from another time. It is not marked on maps, and rangers rarely mention it unless asked directly. They simply say the canyon has acoustic anomalies and encourage hikers to stay on the established trails. But those who wander close enough know there is more to the place than unusual echoes. The shrine sits deep in a twisting channel of rock, accessible only by following a thin path carved by seasonal floods. As hikers progress toward it, the canyon gradually narrows, squeezing the daylight into thin blue strips above their heads. Footsteps become louder, and even a casual breath rebounds off the sandstone in strange, layered patterns. Many describe feeling as though the canyon itself is listening, absorbing every sound and whispering it back in altered form. The first thing visitors usually notice near the shrine is the muffled chanting that floats through the air. At times, it seems distant, like voices carried by the wind from miles away. Other times, it sounds close enough that hikers instinctively turn, expecting to see someone standing behind them. The chanting is low, rhythmic, and strangely soothing despite its eerie qualities. It pulses softly, like the beat of a distant drum encased in stone. One couple hiking the canyon at dusk recalled hearing the chanting long before they reached the shrine. At first, they thought it was a group of hikers ahead of them, maybe someone playing music or singing. But as they approached a bend in the canyon, the sound cut off abruptly. The couple rounded the corner to find the path empty, the walls silent. Moments later, the chanting resumed behind them, echoing faintly as though drifting from the canyon they had just passed through. Others have reported hearing the sound shift locations without warning. sometimes rising from above the canyon walls, sometimes seeming to seep from the ground beneath their feet. The tone rarely changes, yet the direction does, leaving visitors unsure where the source truly lies. Those who continue deeper eventually reach the canyon whisper shrine itself, a naturally carved alcove. Smooth inside as if shaped by centuries of careful hands, the chamber is small, not much larger than a one-room shelter, and lit by a vertical slit of light that descends like a spotlight from a crack in the canyon ceiling. The moment visitors enter, the air feels different, heavier, more still. Even the faint breeze that travels through the canyon seems to die at the threshold. Many hikers report seeing figures inside the shrine, faint silhouettes standing near the back wall. These shapes are not solid, nor detailed, but dark impressions of people. Their outlines resemble individuals wearing long, flowing garments that shift as though blown by a breeze no one else can feel. Most commonly, the figures appear to be grouped in small clusters, facing inward, their heads slightly bowed. However, the moment anyone steps closer, the silhouettes dissolve. Visitors walk forward expecting to confront another person, only to find the chamber completely empty. The disappearance is often so sudden that hikers hesitate, unsure whether their eyes misinterpreted shadows or whether the figures genuinely vanished. One photographer described seeing two figures inside the shrine. They stood motionless, side by side, their postures strangely serene. Thinking they were other hikers, she raised her camera to capture the scene. But the instant her finger touched the shutter, the figures blinked out like candle flames in the wind. When she examined the dust on the ground where they had stood, she found fresh footprints, deep clear impressions that had not been there minutes earlier. She followed the tracks as they moved toward the far wall, only to discover that the footprints stopped abruptly at the stone, as if the individuals had walked straight through it. Footprints like these are commonly reported at the shrine. Some appear as though left by bare feet, others by soft leather or woven sandals. They often form circular patterns or lines that lead toward the canyon's darker corners. The most unsettling detail is that many visitors find footprints even when no one else has entered the canyon that day, according to ranger logs. One hiker recounted seeing a single set of footprints winding into the chamber, the prints perfectly spaced, as though their maker had walked slowly with purpose. As he examined them, the chanting started again, vibrating lightly through the stone. The footprints trembled with each pulse, small clouds of dust lifting into the air. When he stepped back in alarm, the chanting ceased instantly, and the dust settled as if nothing had happened. The canyon's odd acoustics have been studied, but nothing explains the chanting, the figures, or the footprints that appear and vanish without warning. Some researchers believe the shrine sits at the convergence of unique geological formations that amplify certain frequencies. Others suggest the canyon's natural resonances can trigger auditory illusions. But these explanations do little to address the visual encounters or the footprints documented by hikers. For many visitors, the most unforgettable aspect of the Canyon Whisper Shrine is the feeling of presence, a sensation that someone is standing just out of sight. Some hikers describe a prickling along their shoulders, as though eyes are watching from the bends in the canyon. Others feel a gentle pressure, like a hand resting briefly against their back or shoulder. Still others report moments of complete silence, when even the canyon's usual wind seems to halt, as though the entire landscape is waiting. Despite its eerie reputation, nothing dangerous has ever been recorded at the shrine. The canyon feels more curious than threatening, as though the rituals of past ages continue to breathe through the stone. The figures who vanish seem intent on their own silent ceremonies, uninterested in the living who stumble into their domain. High in the Uinta Mountains, where the wind carves its own language across the ridgelines, and the mist drifts like restless spirits, lies an isolated place known as the Mistfall Mountain Shrine. Hidden among jagged peaks and ancient pines, the shrine sits on a stone platform that overlooks a deep, cloud-choked valley. Reaching it requires a long trek through dense forest, slippery switchbacks, and weather that changes without warning. Most hikers never venture that far. Those who do often return with stories whispered more carefully than the rest of their adventures. The shrine itself appears unexpectedly. One moment, hikers are walking through a narrow pass. The next, the trail opens into a small, circular clearing carved from solid rock. Towering pillars rise on three sides, their surfaces etched with symbols worn smooth by centuries of wind and ice. In the center stands a weathered stone altar, waist-high and cold to the touch even in midsummer. Moss clings stubbornly to its cracks, and frost gathers along its edges at dawn. The air here is strangely still, as though nature pauses to observe the ancient structure. Most visitors notice the cold drafts first. Even on warm days, an icy breath sweeps across the altar at irregular intervals, chilling the air enough to raise goosebumps. The drafts feel deliberate, like something within the shrine is inhaling and exhaling. Hikers describe sudden waves of cold that roll over them, making their teeth chatter despite the mild temperature. Some say the cold comes with a faint hiss, like wind passing through unseen corridors. Others feel it as a steady pull, as though the altar is drawing heat away from their bodies. One experienced backpacker described setting his hands on the altar to rest. The moment his palms touched the stone, a freezing gust blasted across the platform, so sharply it felt like winter had dropped from the sky. His breath fogged instantly, and frost appeared along the altar's rim. When he yanked his hands back, the wind vanished, returning the clearing to its natural temperature. He later said it felt like the shrine was responding to his presence in a way that was neither friendly nor hostile, simply aware. Visitors also speak of ghostly figures that gather around the altar, appearing in quiet moments when the mist thickens. These figures wear long, hooded robes that obscure their faces completely. They stand in a loose circle around the altar, hands raised or held together, as if performing a ritual from ages past. The figures move in slow, fluid motions, bowing, lifting their arms, or placing invisible offerings onto the cold stone surface. Hikers who have witnessed these apparitions describe them as translucent, their forms wavering like reflections in disturbed water. The figures never speak. Instead, they repeat their movements in silence, giving the impression of rites practiced so often that the gestures have become embedded in the very air. The repetition feels purposeful, though no visitor can understand its meaning. One mountaineer who camped near the shrine recalled waking in the middle of the night to see several hooded figures gathered around the altar. They moved with synchronized grace, their robes fluttering despite the still air. He watched in stunned silence as one figure extended its hand toward the center of the altar. A faint glow illuminated the stone for a heartbeat before fading. When he blinked, the figures were gone. Yet the next morning, he found fresh frost covering only the central slab, despite the warm sunrise. Others have described seeing a single figure standing at the platform's edge, facing the valley below. The silhouette remains perfectly still, its hood turned toward the descending clouds. Some believe it is a sentinel, watching over the shrine. When approached, the figure vanishes without sound, leaving behind only footprints etched lightly in the frost or dust. The mist plays a significant role in these encounters. It curls around the pillars and drifts across the altar, creating shapes that mimic movement. Some hikers admit they initially mistook the ghostly forms for nothing more than fog catching the light, but many insist that what they saw had structure, arms, shoulders, hoods pulled low too precise to be accidental. When the mist recedes, the clearing always feels emptier, as if something has stepped backward into the mountain's hidden folds. Animals behave strangely near the shrine as well. Birds refuse to perch on the surrounding pillars. Dogs brought by hikers often stop at the edge of the clearing, whining and refusing to enter. Even the breeze feels different, moving in tight, circular motions rather than sweeping naturally across the ridge. Some visitors note a faint humming beneath the silence. a vibration that seems to rise from deep within the stone platform. Despite these unsettling occurrences, the shrine does not inspire fear so much as awe. Most who visit describe a weight of history hanging in the air. They feel as though they are intruding upon something sacred, an ancient ceremony that continues long after the people who built the shrine have disappeared. The hooded figures seem focused, not on the living, but on preserving their rites, repeating motions carved into the collective memory of the mountain. There are unconfirmed stories that suggest the shrine was once a place of offerings to the natural spirits of the Uintas. Early explorers noted that the area held signs of ceremonial use long before modern trails existed. Some speculate that the ghostly figures are echoes of those rituals, impressions left behind by generations who honored the mountain with unwavering devotion. The cold drafts may be part of these lingering energies, residual breath from ceremonies long ended. Or perhaps they are simply the mountain's own exhalations, funneled through hidden caverns beneath the altar. Whatever their cause, they remain a defining feature of the shrine, unsettling visitors with their precise timing and unnatural chill. Hikers who leave the Mistfall Mountain Shrine often feel a lingering sense of quiet reflection. The experience is not easily forgotten. They return to the world below with stories of icy winds, robed figures, and silent rituals that echo in their minds long after the hike is over. The Uintas are vast and untamed, and the shrine sits at their heart like a timeless witness to the passage of ages. The Mistfall Mountain Shrine remains one of the range's most intriguing mysteries, a place where the living step briefly into the remnants of ancient rites, and where the past continues to move in the swirling mist. Deep within the Wasatch Mountains, far beyond the well-marked trails and scenic overlooks, lies a place hikers discover only by accident or through whispered local legend. It is known as the Bloodstone Shrine, a secluded stone structure built into the mountainside, where the air carries a peculiar weight and sound behaves as though it has memory. Few venture near it intentionally. Those who do often leave with stories that settle into the mind and refuse to fade. The approach to the shrine takes visitors through narrow, twisting paths lined with pines that tower high enough to blot out the sun. The air grows colder the closer one gets, not sharply but steadily, as though descending into a chamber rather than ascending a mountain trail. Eventually the forest clears, revealing a rocky platform partially shrouded by undergrowth. At its center stands the shrine, a circular arrangement of stone pillars rising from the earth like broken teeth. The pillars are streaked with deep red mineral deposits that gleam faintly in the dusk light, giving the structure its unsettling name. At first glance, the Bloodstone Shrine appears abandoned, its stones cracked and its base littered with years of fallen leaves and wind-blown debris. But the moment visitors step into the clearing, a hush falls over the surroundings. The forest grows still, the wind seems to pause, and the temperature drops noticeably. Some describe this sensation as stepping into a different time entirely, as though the mountain has drawn a curtain of silence around the shrine. It is during the night, however, that the shrine reveals its most unnerving secrets. Travelers who have camped nearby or passed through after sunset report seeing figures pacing around the stone circle. These apparitions move with a slow, deliberate rhythm, tracing the same path along the shrine's perimeter. Their shapes are human-like, but lack defining features, no faces, no clear clothing, only dark outlines that shift like smoke against the moonlit stones. They appear to follow an ancient route, walking in single file, or forming a loose ring, circling the pillars as if reenacting a ritual from long ago. One camper described waking in the middle of the night to the sound of soft footfalls crunching over gravel. When he peeked outside his tent, he saw 3 figures marching in a tight arc around the shrine, their motions synchronized as though guided by the same invisible force. Every few seconds, one figure would pause and turn toward the forest, its head lifting slightly as if listening or sensing something. The camper watched for several minutes, frozen in place, until the figures dissolved into the darkness without leaving footprints behind. Another hiker reported hearing the pacing before seeing it. As she approached the clearing under a full moon, she heard steady, measured steps, too rhythmic to be wildlife, too heavy to be wind. When she stepped into view, the figures were already moving, circling the shrine with a strange determination. She tried calling out to them, but her voice seemed to fall flat, swallowed by the cold air. The figures paid her no attention. When she attempted to walk closer, they vanished instantly, leaving the clearing silent and still. Perhaps even more unsettling than the apparitions are the whispers that fill the air around the bloodstone shrine. Visitors often describe hearing voices drifting between the pillars, speaking in what sounds like ancient languages. The whispers are soft, urgent, and overlapping, as though several individuals are engaged in heated discussion or prayer. The words are unintelligible, but the tone carries an emotional weight, somewhere between pleading and warning. A group of backpackers once paused near the shrine to rest. As they unpacked their gear, they began hearing faint murmurs carried by the wind. At first, they assumed other hikers were approaching, but when the whispers grew louder, they realized no path nearby could have carried voices in that direction. One backpacker leaned closer to the nearest pillar and heard a distinct cadency, rhythmic chant that seemed centuries old. The whispers rose and fell unpredictably, drifting through the stone circle like echoes of forgotten ceremonies. Occasionally, the whispers intensify into something far more chilling, faint screams carried by the mountain wind. These screams are distant, muffled, and short-lived, as though coming from deep within the earth or from far down the mountain slopes. Hikers describe them as high, strained cries that last only a moment before fading. The screams never repeat, and they never seem close enough to suggest immediate danger, yet they leave a lingering sense of dread. One solo hiker recounted hearing a brief, piercing scream while crossing the clearing. It was so sudden and sharp that he instinctively dropped to the ground, convinced someone was in trouble. But when he searched the area, he found nothing. The forest surrounding the shrine remained eerily quiet, without even the rustle of nocturnal animals. Only when he stepped back toward the stone circle did he hear whispers again, as though the shrine itself were murmuring in response to the cry. Despite the fear these phenomena evoke, visitors consistently describe a strange sense of order around the bloodstone shrine. The pacing figures do not behave aggressively. The whispers do not feel malicious, more like fragments of old conversations drifting through time. The screams, though unsettling, seem distant and disconnected. It is as if the shrine is a place where memories from the past replay on an endless loop, unaffected by the presence of the living. Some researchers speculate that the shrine was once a ceremonial site used by ancient cultures whose rituals were deeply tied to the land. The red mineral deposits on the pillars may have held symbolic meaning, and the circular layout suggests gatherings or rites performed for generations. If the pacing figures are echoes of those rituals, their repetitive path around the shrine may represent a tradition lost to history but preserved in ghostly form. Visitors who leave the bloodstone shrine often speak of a lingering heaviness, a sense that they witnessed something older than the mountains themselves. The whispers remain etched in their minds, the pacing shadows stamped into memory, long after the hike is over. Many vow never to return, yet admit that the experience was unlike anything else they have encountered, haunting, surreal, and strangely reverent. The Wasatch Mountains hold many secrets, but none as enigmatic as the bloodstone shrine, where ancient voices ride the wind and figures pace through the night, forever circling the stones of their forgotten rituals. High above Park City, where ski trails carve bright lines into winter slopes and summer hikers follow narrow ridges into the clouds, rises a lesser-known summit called Shadow Peak. At its base lies a small and easily overlooked rock formation known as the Shadow Peak Shrine. Despite its unassuming size, the shrine holds a reputation among locals and seasoned hikers as one of the strangest and most unsettling places in the entire range. It is a site where shadows behave strangely, shapes appear on narrow ledges without warning, and symbols materialize on rocks overnight as though etched by hands no one ever sees. The hike to Shadow Peak Shrine begins with a gentle trail that winds through aspens and pines, sunlight flickering across the forest floor. But as hikers climb higher, the air grows cooler, thinner, and sharper. The trees thin out, replaced by rocky outcroppings that jut sharply from the slope. Conversations fade as the wind adopts a hollow whistle, as though running through unseen cracks in the mountain. Birds grow scarce. The shrine itself occupies a narrow plateau above a steep drop-off. It consists of a ring of stones, each about knee-high, forming a small circular enclosure. The stones look natural at first glance, but closer inspection reveals they were placed deliberately. Their surfaces are smooth in some areas, etched in others, as if shaped by both nature and human hands across many generations. A flat slab sits at the center, resembling a crude altar weathered by decades, perhaps centuries of wind, snow, and sunlight. During the day, the shrine seems deserted, a lonely monument to an unknown past. But as dusk approaches, the shadows begin to stretch unnaturally, bending at odd angles, as if pulled by some unseen force. Many visitors claim that this is when the shadowy forms begin to appear on the ledges around the shrine. These forms vary in size and clarity. Some look like silhouettes of people standing at the edge of the drop-off, gazing across the valley below. Others appear crouched or seated on boulders, their outlines shifting as if swaying gently in the wind. A few hikers report seeing tall, slender shapes that seem to glide along the ridge, disappearing the moment anyone tries to focus on them. The shapes do not resemble wildlife. They move too smoothly, too silently, and too deliberately. One experienced mountaineer described his first encounter at the shrine on a late autumn evening. As he ate his dinner near the stone circle, he spotted a figure standing on a ledge no more than 20 feet away. The form stood motionless, its outline sharp enough to resemble a person wearing a hooded jacket. But when he called out, the figure did not respond. Instead, it slowly receded into the rock face, fading as if dissolving into the stone itself. When he climbed to the ledge to investigate, the ground was undisturbed and no footprints, no loose gravel, nothing to suggest anyone had been there. Another hiker experienced something even more disturbing. As she approached the shrine just before sunrise, she noticed a shadow pacing back and forth along a narrow ridge. The shape moved with purpose, as though patrolling the mountain's edge. She watched quietly, unsure whether to approach or retreat. When the sun crept over the horizon, the shadow did not fade. Instead, it shifted, growing thinner until it finally winked out of existence. The ridge remained empty. Stranger still are the symbols that appear around the shrine. These markings show up on rocks, overnight sometimes, on the stones that form the shrine's circle, sometimes on nearby boulders along the trail. The symbols vary in complexity. Some are simple lines or spirals, while others resemble intricate geometric designs or ancient runic characters. They appear etched into the stone surface, yet the grooves are not deep. They look as though they were carved quickly, but with precision. Locals insist the symbols were never part of Park City's mining history, nor do they match markings from indigenous groups known to have lived in the region. Hikers often discover new symbols after nights of heavy wind, as though the mountain itself chooses moments of turbulence to reveal them. One group of backpackers camped near the shrine for a night, placing their tents just below the ridge. Before turning in, they walked around the stone circle, noting that the rocks were plain and unmarked. But the next morning, they woke to find a series of interconnected lines etched across the central slab, perfectly straight, intersecting at symmetrical angles. None of their tools could have made such clean markings, and no one had left their tent during the night. The backpackers left early, feeling watched as they descended the trail. When they investigate, they find nothing but fresh symbols glowing faintly with morning dew. Some believe the markings are attempts at communication, though what they convey remains a mystery. Others think they are remnants of an ancient ritual, preserved by forces that linger on the ridge. A few more imaginative locals claim the symbols change depending on who visits the shrine, adapting to the energy or intentions of the hikers who pass through. The atmosphere around the Shadow Peak Shrine certainly encourages such interpretations. The wind never seems to follow a predictable path here. It curls through the stone circle, rises in sudden bursts, or falls completely silent, as though holding its breath. Sometimes, hikers report feeling a prickling sensation across their shoulders or necks, as if someone stands just behind them. Turning around reveals only empty space and the endless stretch of mountain terrain. The shrine has no confirmed origin, no historical documentation, and no official recognition, yet the stories surrounding it grow more numerous every year. Whether the shadowy figures are echoes of something ancient or tricks of the fading light, whether the symbols are carved by unseen hands or by the mountain itself, the mystery remains unsolved. Visitors who leave Shadow Peak often describe an eerie sense of being observant but studied. They carry with them vivid memories of impossible shadows and markings that raise more questions than answers. The shrine lingers in the mind long after the trail ends, a place where the mountain seems alive with secrets, whispering them only to those who dare to stay after the sun dips behind the ridge. The Shadow Peak Shrine remains one of Park City's most haunting mysteries, a silent watcher in the mountains, where shadows gather and symbols appear as though drawn by invisible hands, inviting questions that the wind never answers. The road into Logan Canyon narrows as the mountains rise on both sides, their slopes thick with black pine trees that sway even when no wind moves through the valley. Travelers who have spent time in this canyon often speak of a quiet unease that settles over them, a feeling that something ancient lives among the shadows. But nowhere is this sensation stronger than at the Black Pine Shrine, a small stone structure hidden just off an old trail. Though simple in appearance, the shrine carries a reputation that has endured for generations. Visitors describe flickering lights dancing between the trees, chanting that seems to drift from nowhere, and the unmistakable sense of being watched. The shrine itself is made of dark stone, its surface worn smooth by time and weather. It is surrounded by towering black pines that seem older than the canyon itself. Their branches intertwine overhead, creating a canopy that blocks out much of the sunlight, leaving the shrine in a constant state of twilight. Many who come here say that the air feels heavier, colder, as if the temperature drops the moment they step between the trees. Some believe the shrine marks an ancient gathering place. Others claim it was built as a warning, not a welcome. One of the most consistent reports involves the feeling of an unseen presence watching from just beyond the line of trees. Hikers describe the sensation not as threatening, but unmistakably deliberate, as though whatever watches them is studying their movements. Some have turned to find only empty forest, yet the pressure of unseen eyes remains. A few have said that sudden chills move across their necks, like a cold breath or a whisper of air directed solely at them. Most visitors brush it off as the eerie atmosphere of the canyon, but others insist the sensation is too focused, too intentional, to be imagination. The flickering lights are perhaps the most talked about phenomena. They appear most often at dusk, drifting between the trees like floating embers. Witnesses describe them as small and pale, never bright enough to illuminate the forest, but impossible to ignore. They move unpredictably, sometimes darting away when approached, other times hovering as if watching the watcher. More than one hiker has followed the lights only to become disoriented, walking in circles until daylight breaks. Some believe the lights are harmless natural phenomena. Others believe they are something else, entirely markers, guides, or warnings from a presence that cannot be seen. Chanting is another commonly reported phenomenon at the Black Pine Shrine. It is never loud and never clear, more like distant voices carried on the wind. The sound drifts through the trees at unpredictable moments, sometimes in broad daylight, sometimes in the dead of night. The words are never fully understandable, but listeners describe them as rhythmic, slow, and haunting. A few hikers have tried recording the sounds, but the audio captured is faint, distorted, and easily dismissed as rustling branches or shifting air. Still, those who have heard it in person insist there is intention behind it. They say the voices rise and fall in a pattern, like a ritual being repeated far away and long after the participants should have vanished from this world. One visitor, a photographer exploring Logan Canyon for a landscape project, reported hearing the chanting during a late afternoon hike. She said the sound seemed to come from the direction of the shrine, though no one else was present. She followed the trail, listening as the chanting grew only slightly louder, then abruptly stopped. When she reached the shrine, she found it empty and silent. Yet she could not shake the feeling that someone or something had been there only moments before she arrived. When she reviewed her photos later that night, she noticed a faint blur of light near the edge of one frame, shaped almost like a figure. She dismissed it as a trick of the sun, but the experience left her uneasy. Another story comes from a pair of hikers who visited the shrine at dusk. They had heard about the flickering lights and wanted to see them for themselves. As they approached, they saw tiny pale lights drifting between the trees. At first, they thought they were fireflies, but the lights moved too slowly, too smoothly, and they did not blink. The hikers decided to take a closer look. But as they stepped toward the lights, a sudden cold swept across the area. They felt the air thicken, heavy with an unknown presence. The lights faded, disappearing into the darkness of the pines. Both hikers later said it felt as if the forest itself had exhaled around them, watching their reaction. Local legends offer little explanation for the shrine. Some say it was built centuries ago by early settlers seeking to mark a sacred site or appease unseen forces within the canyon. Others claim it originated even earlier, with indigenous peoples who understood the land's energy in ways modern visitors cannot. There are no official records explaining its purpose, and historians have found no concrete evidence linking it to either group. The mystery has only deepened with time. Despite its unsettling reputation, the Black Pine Shrine continues to draw visitors. Some come out of curiosity, eager to see the flickering lights or hear the chanting. Others come seeking the quiet solitude of the canyon, hoping the stories are nothing more than folklore. But most who visit leave with a sense that the shrine is far more than an abandoned structure in an old forest. They describe the canyon as alive in ways that defy explanation, as if memories linger in the shadows, whispering their presence to anyone willing to listen. Those who return to the canyon again and again say the shrine's mysteries are not meant to be solved. Instead, they believe the shrine exists as a reminder of history's forgotten, of presences unseen, and of the thin line between the known world and the one that watches from the depths of the trees. The Grand Staircase is a land of vast silence, a place where wind carves ancient cliffs and time seems to hold its breath. Even among its many remote and rugged landmarks, few places inspire the same mixture of awe and unease as the silent Echo Shrine. Hidden deep within a sandstone basin, the shrine consists of a cluster of upright stones arranged in a circular pattern. No official records explain who built it or why, yet the structure has been there long enough for the desert to shape it, stain it, and partially bury it, while never erasing it entirely. Travelers who stumble upon it often report strange sights and unnerving sounds, as though the past has never fully loosened its hold on this lonely place. At sunrise and sunset, their shadows stretch across the smooth desert floor, creating shapes that seem to shift with each passing minute. Those who have watched long enough say the shadows almost appear to bow, raise their arms, or circle one another. Most shrug it off as an illusion caused by the desert light, but others feel certain they witnessed something purposeful, ritual carried out in shadows only. Yet the most unsettling claims come from travelers who swear they have seen actual figures near the shrine, not just shadows. The figures are described as tall and thin, their movements slow and repetitive, as though reenacting ceremonies from a time long gone. Many witnesses report that the figures seem unaware of the viewer, focused entirely on their own silent rites. They bend, gesture, or trace lines in the sand, only to vanish when one draws close. No footprints follow their steps, no handprints mark their touch, and no voice escapes their lips, only the quiet motion of a ritual repeated endlessly. Through the dim blue light, he saw three shapes standing beside the stones. They appeared to sway gently, as if in the rhythm of a chant he could not hear. He later described the encounter as like watching ghosts performing a dance they had never stopped practicing. While the sightings are strange, it is the sounds of the shrine that leave the deepest mark on visitors. Many say they hear footsteps circling them as soon as they step between the stones. The footsteps are soft, almost cautious, but unmistakably real. They move around the shrine slowly, as though someone unseen is walking in a deliberate path. The footsteps pause, resume on the opposite side, then fade, as though whoever wore whatever made them has stepped out of the physical world entirely. A group of hikers who visited the shrine shortly before dusk reported an experience they struggled to explain. As they stood near the stones, one felt the unmistakable vibration of footsteps behind him, like someone walking across firm sand. He turned immediately, expecting to see one of his friends, but found the area empty. The footsteps continued, now moving past his left side. Another hiker heard them too, then another. All three stood still, listening as the phantom footsteps made a slow circle around them. The sound was steady, soft, and calm, not rushing, not threatening, simply walking. Some visitors report hearing other sounds as well, faint murmurs, echoes of non-existent voices, or the distant tapping of stone against stone. These sounds are never loud and rarely clear, more like remnants of something that once existed and is still trying to reach across the divide of time. A few have tried recording the noises, but the desert wind tends to overpower everything. They describe them as rhythmic, patterned, like fragments of a ceremony being carried out by unseen hands. Theories about the origins of the silent echo shrine vary widely. Some believe the site was a ceremonial gathering place for ancient peoples who once lived in the region. Others think it was a celestial marker used for observing seasonal changes. A few suggest that the stones might have served a spiritual purpose, forming a circle where rituals or prayers were performed. Without artifacts or inscriptions, these ideas remain speculation, yet visitors cannot ignore the sense of presence the site carries, as though the land itself remembers more than it reveals. Geologists note that the basin where the shrine sits is acoustically unique. The sandstone walls reflect sound in odd ways, creating echoes that can confuse even experienced hikers. Soft noises can seem to come from multiple directions at once, and footsteps can appear closer or farther than they truly are. While this might explain some of the auditory reports, it does not account for the countless claims of figures seen performing rituals near the stones. The air grows cooler, and the stones seem to absorb the last traces of daylight. Some travelers say that after dark, the silence becomes so complete that even the sound of their breathing feels intrusive. And it is in this deep quiet that the footsteps return, circling slowly, purposefully, unseen. Those who have experienced it say it feels like someone is guarding the shrine, maintaining a boundary between the living world and whatever memories linger among the stones. Whether the silent echo shrine is a place of ancient ceremony, a location of long-forgotten gatherings, or simply a natural formation that stirs the imagination, one thing remains certain: it leaves no visitor unchanged. The figures that appear at its edges, the footsteps that circle without a body to cast them, and the strange quiet that settles over the stones, all suggest that the past is not gone here. It is simply repeating itself, waiting for the next witness to listen closely enough to hear it. High in the desert mountains above Moab lies a stretch of red sandstone cliffs that glows with an otherworldly beauty when the sun sets. Among these towering formations is a hidden alcove known as the Blood Moon Mountain Shrine. Few trails lead directly to it, and those who reach it often describe a sense of being watched long before the shrine itself becomes visible. The surrounding cliffs rise like great walls of fire-colored stone, their shadows deepening with every passing minute of dusk. It is here, in this harsh and magnificent landscape, that countless visitors have reported strange lights, inexplicable movements, and rituals that appear to be carried out by shadows not cast by any living presence. The shrine is a simple structure, 3 tall, narrow stones arranged in a half circle, their surfaces scarred by time and marked with faint grooves. They stand on a ledge overlooking a wide canyon, allowing the wind to rush across them with a low, constant hum. During the day, the site seems still and empty, almost ordinary. But by night, especially under a rising moon, the stones take on a different life entirely. Visitors often speak of a crimson glow appearing on the cliffs, a light that seems to pulse from within the rocks themselves. This glow has been seen on nights when no artificial light could possibly reach the mountains, and it is always described as tinted in deep shades of red, like the color of cooling embers or distant firelight. Those who have witnessed the red-tinted glow say it begins faintly, a soft blush along the sandstone ridges. It slowly strengthens until it appears as though the entire mountain is illuminated by an unseen lantern. The most unsettling detail is that the glow does not behave like moonlight or starlight. It shifts, flickers, and moves as if responding to something hidden within the cliffs. Many visitors compare it to the effect of watching flames dance behind a thin curtain. Never quite visible, yet impossible to ignore. It is during these moments of crimson illumination that witnesses report seeing shadows that defy explanation. These shadows do not align with the light source, nor do they match the outline of any natural feature. Instead, they move independently across the cliff edges, gliding in slow, deliberate patterns. They appear to gather near the shrine stones, pacing the ledge in wide arcs before returning to their starting points. Some describe the movements as ritualistic figures, bending, turning, and gesturing in ways that suggest ancient ceremonies long forgotten by the living. A photographer who camped near the shrine recounted an experience that still unsettles him years later. While setting up his equipment, he noticed a tall shadow moving along the opposite cliff. It stretched unnaturally long across the rock face, swaying like a figure performing a silent invocation. Believing it to be a hiker or climber, he called out, but the shadow did not respond. Instead, it turned sharply and seemed to glide down the cliff wall, disappearing before it reached the bottom. No person was ever found in the area, and no tracks were left behind. The photographer later said the shadow moved with purpose, like it knew exactly what it was doing. Others tell of seeing multiple shadows performing synchronized motions, as though carrying out coordinated rites. One group of hikers watched for distinct silhouettes pacing along a narrow ridge. Their movements so synchronized they seemed to follow an unseen rhythm. When the hikers approached, the figures scattered, not like people running, but like smoke dissolving into the night. Their paths left no physical signs, yet the hikers felt certain they had not imagined what they saw. In some accounts, witnesses described the shadows extending beyond the ground, rising up the cliff faces in tall, twisting shapes that seemed to stretch unnaturally. These elongated forms bend over the shrine stones, as though inspecting or tending to them. Their movements are quiet, slow, and deliberate. When the red glow fades, the shadows vanish instantly, leaving the mountains silent once more. The soundscape surrounding the shrine only adds to its unsettling reputation. Although the desert is often quiet at night, many visitors report hearing faint rhythmic patterns carried on the wind. These sounds resemble chanting or soft murmurs, never loud enough to identify words, but steady enough to give the impression of a ritual being performed nearby. Some hear a dull tapping against the rocks, as if stones are being struck in a measured cadence. Others describe the sound of footsteps pacing along the cliffs, even when the ground is too steep for a person to walk. A pair of hikers who visited during a full moon described hearing what sounded like a small group of people walking counterclockwise around the shrine. The footsteps were slow and measured, circling once, then again. When the hikers shined their flashlights, the sound stopped abruptly. They found themselves alone on the ledge, with no sign of movement anywhere. Minutes later, the red glow began to appear along the cliffs above them. They left soon after, feeling they had intruded on something not meant for living eyes. Theories surrounding the Blood Moon Mountain Shrine vary widely. Some believe it was an ancient ceremonial site, possibly used by early inhabitants of the region who understood the land in ways modern visitors do not. Others think the glow might be caused by rare atmospheric conditions interacting with the red sandstone, though this does little to explain the moving shadows or ritual-like patterns. A few suggest the shrine sits on a geological boundary that produces unusual electromagnetic activity, causing both visual illusions and auditory hallucinations. Yet, even those who lean toward scientific explanations hesitate when faced with the sheer number of similar reports spanning decades. What remains undeniable is the atmosphere of the shrine itself. Even without strange lights or shadows, the place carries a palpable sense of anticipation, as though something is waiting, lingering in the still air. The wind seems to change tone near the stones, deepening into a low hum that feels almost vocal. Travelers often say, the ledge feels like a stage, the cliffs a gathering place for forces unseen. Whether the rituals carried out here are memories preserved in shadow, natural phenomena misunderstood through fear, or echoes of something far older than human history. The Blood Moon Mountain Shrine leaves a lasting impression on all who visit. The red glow that stains the mountains at night, the shadows that move with purpose, and the silent rites performed along the cliffs serve as reminders that some places hold their mysteries tightly. In the vast desert around Moab, where time stretches and cliffs rise like ancient guardians, the Blood Moon Mountain Shrine stands as one of the region's most haunting and unforgettable enigmas. Deep within the forested expanse of the Uintawasatch National Forest lies a clearing that seems to exist outside the natural rhythm of the mountains. Known as the Fogville Shrine, this secluded site is tucked between ridges where the light struggles to fully break through the canopy. Most visitors discover it by accident, wandering off trail or following the sound of water trickling from unseen springs. What they encounter is a place where mist gathers even on the clearest days, forming a luminous haze around a cluster of ancient stones. The shrine is quiet, still, and strangely cold, an unnatural chill that sinks into the skin no matter how warm the summer air may be. The shrine itself consists of several upright stones arranged in a crescent shape. Their surfaces are smooth, worn by centuries of wind and weather, though some claim faint etchings remain if one looks closely enough. Moss clings to their bases, and tiny wildflowers bloom in the shelter of their shadows. The clearing around the stones is soft with pine needles and patches of pale grass that seem to grow differently from the surrounding vegetation. It is a place that feels both untouched and deeply inhabited, though not by anything visible. Visitors often remark that the mist surrounding the shrine behaves strangely. It pools at knee height in the early morning, drifting in slow currents like breath from an unseen creature. At dusk, it rises suddenly, filling the clearing with pale clouds that obscure the trees and blur the stones until they seem to hover. Even on cloudless days, when the sun is high and the air is warm, the shrine remains cool and shrouded in thin veils of fog. Some hikers say the mist forms too quickly and moves too deliberately to be natural. It gathers, folds, stretches almost as though it is responding to something hidden in the ground beneath it. It is within this ever-present fog that the figures appear. Reports of ghostly shapes at Fogville Shrine are remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe tall, hazy silhouettes emerging from the mist as though stepping through a doorway. Their outlines shimmer faintly, often carrying indistinct objects that resemble tools, baskets, or offerings. The figures move with purpose, their motions calm and repetitive, as if performing long-forgotten tasks. Some appear to kneel near the stones, presenting their offerings before fading. Others seem to stand guard, watching the forest silently before dissolving back into the mist. A forest ranger once told the story of a camper who arrived at the station pale and trembling after stumbling upon the shrine at dawn. He claimed he saw 3 figures standing in front of the stones. Each held a long, curved object that glinted like polished wood or bone. The figures lifted these tools in unison before lowering them in slow, fluid movements. The camper watched for nearly a minute, mesmerized, before the mist thickened and the figures vanished. When he approached the spot moments later, the air was icy cold, and the ground bore no sign that anyone or anything had stood there at all. Others have reported hearing faint sounds accompanying these apparitions. Some describe the soft rustling of cloth, as if the figures wear garments that brush against the fog. Others speak of distant tapping, like wooden instruments striking stone. A few have heard the whisper of voices, too quiet to distinguish words, but unmistakably human in rhythm. These sounds carry an unsettling emotion, neither threatening nor welcoming, but deeply solemn, as though part of a ceremony older than memory. The cold drafts that sweep the shrine are another phenomenon frequently mentioned. Even in midsummer, when the forest air is warm and still, sudden chills move through the clearing like invisible currents. These cold spots appear without warning, drifting across the shrine before vanishing into the trees. People who stand within them describe the sensation as a deep, penetrating cold that feels out of place in the mountain heat. Some say the drafts feel directed, as if someone walked past them, someone whose footsteps leave no trace. One group of hikers experienced a particularly chilling encounter. They were resting near the shrine when a dense wave of mist rolled in from the tree line, covering the clearing within seconds. As they stood to leave, a cold draft swept around them, circling their group twice before stopping abruptly. In the thick fog, they saw a figure standing near one of the stones. It held something in its hands, an object shaped like a bowl or vessel. The figure raised the object toward the stone, paused, then slowly lowered it. The hikers backed away, but the apparition did not move toward them or acknowledge their presence. It simply completed its motion and dissolved as the mist thinned. When the group returned the next day, the air was warm, the shrine was clear, and only the stillness remained. As with many mysterious locations, explanations vary. Some researchers believe the shrine may have been used by early inhabitants of the region for seasonal or ceremonial practices, and that the reports of figures are visual illusions caused by temperature differences in the mist. Others suggest that the cold drafts might be the result of hidden springs or air currents moving through cracks in the earth beneath the clearing. Yet even these rational theories falter in the face of persistent, consistent accounts of figures carrying objects, performing gestures, and appearing in coordinated ways that mist alone should not mimic. What strikes most visitors is the atmosphere of purpose that surrounds the shrine. The clearing feels alive, not with wildlife or wind, but with something ancient and quiet. The mist seems to guard the stones, retreating and advancing like a tide that responds to forces unseen. The cold air feels intentional, as though marking boundaries that cannot be crossed easily. Even those who experience nothing unusual speak of feeling watched, not with hostility, but with an awareness that the shrine is not entirely deserted. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Fogville Shrine is not the figures themselves, but the sense that whatever they are doing continues whether anyone is present or not. The offerings lifted toward the stones, the tools carried through the mist, the soft footsteps brushing against the ground, these moments feel like echoes of a world that operates alongside our own. Barely separated by a thin veil of fog, in the deep quiet of the Uinto Osage Cache, where mist curls through ancient pines and cold drafts whisper through the stones. The Fogville Shrine stands as a place where the past seems not only remembered, but alive. Whether these figures are remnants, guardians, or memories made visible, their presence makes the shrine one of the forest's most haunting and unforgettable mysteries. Deep within a steep ravine in the Wasatch Mountains lies a place where sunlight rarely settles and sound behaves strangely. Locals call it the Dark Hollow Shrine, a remote stone arrangement hidden beneath overhanging cliffs and jagged outcrops. Reaching it requires following narrow deer paths that twist along rock walls until they open into a shadowed basin. Even before visitors see the shrine itself, many say they feel a shift in the air, tension, a pressure, an awareness that something unseen watches from the edges of the trail. The shrine is formed from a cluster of flat stones arranged in a circular shape, each slab stacked carefully as though placed with deliberate purpose long ago. Moss creeps along their edges, and cracks run across their surfaces like deep scars. Around the stones, the ground is unusually smooth, as though countless feet once passed over the area. Yet no animals linger here, and no recent human tracks have been found. The place feels abandoned and yet strangely occupied, as though the memory of movement remains even when nothing stirs. It is the sounds of the dark, hollow shrine that unsettle visitors most. Many people report hearing whispers as soon as they step between the stone markers. The whispers drift in uneven waves, sometimes soft as breath, sometimes loud enough to resemble hushed conversation. They seem to come from multiple directions at once, echoing off the cliffs and fading before one can pinpoint their source. These murmurs often shift into patterns that resemble chanting, a repetitive cadence, quiet but unmistakably rhythmic. The chanting lasts only moments, disappearing the instant someone tries to follow it. One hiker recalled standing at the shrine's edge, listening to what he thought were other visitors speaking on a nearby trail. As he walked toward the sound, the whispers grew louder, clearer, almost forming words he could almost understand. But when he rounded the rock wall, he found nothing but empty space and still air. The whispers stopped immediately, replaced by the heavy silence that the shrine seems to absorb from the surrounding forest. Another pair of hikers described hearing two distinct voices, speaking back and forth, one low and steady, the other higher and breathy. Believing they had stumbled upon another group, they approached cautiously. As they stepped into the clearing, the voices cut off mid-sentence. A cold breeze swept past them, and the air grew still again. They explored the entire basin, but found no sign of footprints, gear, or movement. The only sound left was the distant rustling of leaves far up the ridge. But the shrine's reputation is not built on whispers alone. Dozens of visitors have reported seeing shadowy figures sliding along the rocks near the shrine. These figures are described as tall, thin, and featureless, their outlines wavering like smoke against a stone. They do not walk. Witnesses consistently use words like glide, skim, or float. The figures move along cliff edges, across boulder faces, and between the shrine stones in smooth, silent motions. They flicker briefly, vanish, reappear at a different angle, then disappear entirely when anyone tries to approach. A climber who stopped near the shrine to rest described watching a black, elongated shadow glide up a vertical wall as easily as water flowing upward. It moved in a seamless diagonal line, paused, then dissolved before reaching the top. The climber later insisted it was not a trick of light. The form had shape, intention, and direction. He watched it long enough to know it was no animal, no tree shadow, and no cloud crossing the sun. It moved with purpose, he said, like it knew I was watching but didn't care. Another witness reported seeing a shadow form directly beside the shrine stones. It appeared first as a thin sliver, then expanded outward, stretching along the ground before rising upright. The figure stood for several seconds before slipping behind one of the stones. Yet, when the witness walked around to look, nothing was there. No footprints marked the ground, and no wind disturbed the trees. The most unsettling encounters involve multiple figures appearing at once. A solo backpacker described standing near the shrine at dusk when he noticed three shapes gliding along the rocks above him. Their movements were slow, synchronized, as though they followed a shared rhythm. When he stepped forward to get a clearer view, all three vanished at the same instant. No flicker, no fading, just gone. Moments later, the whispers began, swirling around him in a chaotic rush of sound. He left immediately, feeling certain he had intruded on something ongoing and unseen. Explanations for the phenomena vary, with some attributing the experiences to unusual acoustics within the hollow. The high stone walls and narrow passages can bounce sound in unpredictable ways, making even faint noises seem close and directional. Temperature differences between shaded rock and open air may also create visual distortions, heat ripples, moving shadows, or reflections that resemble figures. Yet even those who believe in natural explanations admit that the consistency of reports over the years is difficult to dismiss. Those who approach the shrine with a more spiritual perspective believe it once served as a ceremonial site for ancient inhabitants of the region. They speculate that the whispers and shadows may be echoes of rituals performed generations ago, imprinted into the environment like memories repeating themselves. Some say the shadows are guardian spirits watching over the site. while others think they are remnants of past ceremonies, still playing out in loops that the living occasionally witness. Whatever the cause, one detail remains constant among visitors: the overwhelming sensation of being observed. People describe feeling watched from behind the stones, from the cliff ridges above, or from the dark spaces between boulders. It is not a threatening feeling, but it is persistent in awareness that something unseen occupies the hollow alongside them. Even without supernatural elements, the dark hollow shrine is a place of intense atmosphere. The cold air, the shifting shadows, the strange acoustics, and the deep silence create an environment unlike anywhere else in the Wasatch Mountains. But when the whispers rise, when the chanting echoes faintly across the stones, and when shadowy forms glide along the rocks only to vanish before they can be fully seen, the shrine becomes something far more mysterious. In this secluded corner of the mountains, where darkness gathers early, and the cliffs hold memories like secrets, the dark hollow shrine continues to inspire awe, curiosity, and quiet dread. Whether the whispers come from the living world or from something else entirely, they remind visitors that some places hold stories that are not easily understood, and perhaps never meant to be. High in Logan Canyon, where pine forests stretch toward the sky and narrow trails wind along cliffs, there exists a secluded site known as the Whispering Pine Shrine. Hidden beneath towering evergreens and sheltered by rocky outcroppings, the shrine has long been the subject of local legends. Few who venture this deep into the canyon find it, and those who do rarely forget the experience. Visitors report strange phenomena at all hours, but the most unsettling occurrences seem to happen around midnight, when the wind falls silent, the forest grows heavy, and the shrine comes alive in ways that defy explanation. The shrine itself is modest in structure. A circle of tall, weathered stones surrounds a flat central slab, each rock etched with faint grooves that suggest deliberate shaping by human hands. Long ago, moss clings to their bases, and small pines sprout between cracks in the stone, giving the impression of a site that is both ancient and living. During daylight, the shrine seems ordinary, almost serene, but as darkness falls, the stones take on a strange presence, and visitors report an atmosphere thick with anticipation, as though the clearing waits for something to awaken. Many who visit the Whispering Pine Shrine at night report hearing repeated chanting. The sounds are soft at first, almost imperceptible, but grow steadily clearer as midnight approaches. Some describe the voices as male and female, echoing in unison across the canyon walls. Others hear the chant as a single, monotone rhythm, rising and falling like the pulse of a heartbeat. Despite the volume, the source is never identifiable. Visitors who attempt to locate the voices find only empty shadows and silent trees. The chanting seems to follow them, moving around the shrine in patterns that suggest deliberate pacing, as if invisible figures are performing a ritual just beyond perception. One hiker recounted a particularly chilling experience. He arrived at the shrine late in the evening and set up a small campfire. As the fire flickered, he began to hear the chant, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. He stepped closer to the stone circle, hoping to glimpse another person, but saw nothing. The chant intensified as he circled the stones, pausing at the central slab, then faded abruptly when he looked away. He described the sound as both ancient and alive, a voice that seemed to belong to the forest itself, carrying the weight of countless unseen participants. Alongside the chanting, many visitors report flickering lights that illuminate the shrine in unpredictable ways. These lights appear in the darkness without any source, floating just above the ground or weaving between the trees. Sometimes they cast long, distorted shadows across the stones, stretching the outlines of the rocks into shapes that resemble figures kneeling or bowing. Other times, the shadows twist and elongate along the forest floor, shifting unnaturally with every movement of the unseen light. Those who have witnessed it describe a disorienting sensation, as if the shrine exists in multiple planes, at once simultaneously real and unreal, solid and ephemeral. One couple who spent the night near the shrine reported that the lights seemed to follow them whenever they moved around the clearing. As they stepped closer to the central slab, the shadows lengthened and warped, forming shapes that appeared humanoid but never stayed still long enough to be fully seen. When they turned to leave, the lights blinked out abruptly, leaving the forest in absolute darkness. The couple later admitted that the experience felt more like being observed than threatened, a quiet acknowledgement from something hidden in the night. The combination of chanting and flickering light creates an effect that many describe as hypnotic. Visitors often lose track of time, mesmerized by the interplay of sound and shadow. Some report hearing additional faint noises, the rustle of cloth, the brush of footsteps across dry needles, and the occasional thump of a stone shifting beneath the weight of an unseen presence. These sounds are subtle, almost gentle, yet deeply unnerving, as if the shrine itself is alive and aware of every motion. Those who return at daylight often notice subtle changes in the stones. Lines and grooves that seemed faint the night before appear more defined, almost glowing in the morning sun. Small objects, twigs, stones, or pine cones sometimes lie deliberately arranged along the edge of the circle, as if placed by someone unseen. No human tracks accompany these items, and the wind alone does not account for the careful positioning. This attention to detail reinforces the impression that the shrine is maintained by invisible observers. Entities that respect the space and ensure its rituals continue uninterrupted. Locals tell various legends about the origins of the Whispering Pine Shrine. Some believe it was built by early inhabitants of Logan Canyon as a sacred site for seasonal ceremonies or offerings to the spirits of the forest. Others think it predates human settlement entirely, a place where natural forces converge to create phenomena that are inexplicable by conventional means. Some hikers even suggest that the chanting and lights are echoes of ancient rituals, captured by the land and repeated endlessly for those sensitive enough to perceive them. Despite its eerie reputation, the shrine continues to draw visitors, curious hikers, paranormal enthusiasts, and those simply seeking solitude in the deep forest. Most leave with a mix of awe and unease, noting the lingering sensations of unseen eyes and the memory of shadows that moved with intent. Even when nothing is visible, the clearing feels alive, resonating with an energy that defies explanation. The Whispering Pine Shrine remains one of Logan Canyon's most mysterious and unforgettable locations. The combination of repeated chants, flickering lights, and distorted shadows transforms a simple stone circle into a living experience. Those who witness it speak of an atmosphere both beautiful and unsettling, a place where the boundary between the seen and unseen blurs, and the forest itself seems to carry secrets it will never fully reveal. Visitors leave with more questions than answers, their footsteps echoing in the canyon long after the night has passed. High in the remote reaches of the Uinta Mountains, hidden among dense pine and aspen groves, lies a place known to few outsiders. Raven's Rest Shrine. The shrine sits on a narrow plateau, its jagged rocks forming a natural enclosure that has invited both reverence and fear for centuries. Travelers who stumble upon it often remark on a sudden, inexplicable chill in the air, and a silence so complete it feels almost unnatural. Even in the warmest months, the plateau carries a coolness that seeps into the bones, leaving an uneasy sensation that visitors struggle to shake. The shrine itself is modest, yet unmistakably deliberate. A series of upright stones form a rough circle around a flat central rock, worn smooth by time and the elements. Moss grows thick along the bases of the stones, and small ferns sprout in the gaps, thriving despite the harsh mountain climate. The stones bear faint grooves and markings, remnants of hands long gone, their meanings lost to history. The clearing around the shrine is covered with pine needles and scattered rocks, yet visitors often notice subtle arrangements of stones or twigs that seem deliberate, as if someone or something has touched a space since time immemorial. What draws most attention to Raven's Rest are the figures that appear among the stones. Witnesses describe them as tall, dark silhouettes that glide silently between the rocks, their forms indistinct but undeniably human in proportion. They do not speak, move noiselessly, and vanish without warning when observed directly. A hiker reported seeing a figure bend over the central stone, raising its hands slowly before retreating into the shadows of the surrounding trees. Another described a pair of figures pacing the outer circle, moving in perfect synchronization before fading into the twilight. Those who encounter these forms emphasize that there is no threat, only the overwhelming sense that these presences are aware, deliberate, and always observing. Accompanying these apparitions are reports of cold hands brushing against shoulders. Visitors frequently describe an icy sensation that passes suddenly, as if someone unseen has reached out and touched them. It is never accompanied by a breeze, and the chill feels localized, sometimes fleeting, sometimes lingering long enough to raise goosebumps along the spine. Many recount feeling a presence immediately after, an awareness that they are not alone in the clearing. One hiker recalled pausing mid-step when a sudden cold swept across his back. Turning quickly, he found nothing, yet the sensation remained vivid, leaving a lingering impression that something unseen had brushed past. Alongside these tactile phenomena, the shrine is known for faint cries echoing through the trees. Visitors report hearing muffled sounds, often described as distant sobs or whispers carried on the wind. The cries are soft, almost hesitant, yet impossible to ignore. They seem to originate from different parts of the forest at once, moving unpredictably and fading as quickly as they arise. One woman who camped near the shrine described hearing the cries in the early hours of the morning. She said they swirled around the clearing, coming from every direction, and each time she tried to locate the source, it shifted. The experience left her unnerved, yet deeply fascinated, as though she had glimpsed a memory or ritual preserved by the forest itself. Visitors often report a combination of figures, cold touches, and distant cries in a single encounter. A small group of hikers described arriving at the shrine after dusk. As they approached a stone circle, they felt a sudden drop in temperature. Shadows moved among the upright rocks, and faint murmurs echoed from the tree line. One of the hikers felt a cold brush across her shoulder, and all three reported hearing faint cries in multiple directions. They watched in silence as the figures glided through the clearing, seemingly unconcerned with the observers. When the shadows vanished, the clearing fell into a heavy, almost oppressive silence, leaving the group to contemplate what they had witnessed. The atmosphere of Raven's Rest Shrine is both magnetic and disquieting. Even when nothing unusual occurs, the clearing feels alive, as though the stones themselves remember every ritual, every presence that has passed through. The plateau's isolation intensifies the sensation, removing the sounds of wildlife and human activity, leaving only the whisper of wind through pines and the occasional distant bird call. Time feels slower here. Minutes stretch into hours, and the mind becomes unusually sensitive to faint movement, subtle shifts in light, or distant noises carried across the trees. Local legends about the shrine are varied. Some suggest it was a ceremonial site for the region's early inhabitants, a place where offerings were made and rituals performed to honor the spirits of the mountains. Others claim the area has long been a gathering place for restless souls, drawn to the stones by unfinished business or ancient vows. While no records confirm these stories, the consistency of modern accounts lends them weight. Witnesses across decades report similar phenomena: the appearance of figures, icy touches, and distant cries, suggesting that whatever inhabits the shrine is enduring and deliberate in its presence. Those who visit Raven's Rest often leave transformed, their experiences difficult to articulate. Many describe a mix of fear and reverence, as though they have glimpsed something beyond ordinary perception. They speak of the clearing's power to make one acutely aware of the unseen, to heighten the senses, and to remind visitors of the fragile boundary between the living and the spectral. Even after leaving, the memory lingers, the chill, the shadows, and the faint cries echoing in the mind like a distant, haunting refrain. Whether the figures are spirits, echoes of past rituals, or manifestations of the forest's own energy, one thing remains clear: Raven's Rest Shrine is a place where the ordinary rules of the world seem to bend. The stones, the trees, and the plateau itself form a stage for phenomena that continue to captivate and unsettle those who stumble upon it. It is a site of mystery, a reminder that some places are touched by forces that remain invisible, yet undeniable. a shrine where the echoes of the past linger silently among the pines. Perched high above the red rock valleys of Moab, Mist Peak Shrine is a remote site shrouded in mystery and whispered legends. Accessing it requires a steep hike along narrow sandstone ledges, where the wind carries the scent of sage and the sound of distant cliffs echoing into the canyons below. Even before reaching the shrine, hikers often report a subtle shift in the air, a weighty hush, as if the plateau itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The site is not marked on any official maps, and the sparse trail leading to it ensures that only the most determined or curious travelers ever arrive. The shrine is defined by a rough circle of standing stones, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Unlike other rock formations in the area, these stones bear faint etchings that suggest careful carving, though their exact meaning has long been lost. Surrounding the stones, the sandstone floor of the plateau is uneven, dotted with natural depressions and cracks that collect dust, leaves, and occasional small stones. What gives Mist Peak Shrine its unsettling reputation is not simply its isolation, but the strange phenomena reported by those who linger after dusk. As twilight approaches, many visitors speak of seeing ghostly shapes performing unknown rituals. The figures are described as tall, thin, and featureless, moving with fluid, deliberate motions around the stone circle. They do not speak, and their forms often appear semi-transparent, as if the very air around them bends and shimmers. Witnesses describe them performing gestures that suggest ceremonial activity, kneeling, raising hands toward the sky, or tracing invisible lines across the sandstone floor. Despite their apparent purpose, the figures vanish if approached directly, leaving no footprints or other physical evidence behind. Many who witness the shapes report an immediate, involuntary sense of reverence, a feeling that they are observing a practice that exists beyond ordinary time. One hiker recounted arriving at the shrine just as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls. The plateau was bathed in deep orange light, and the shadows of the stones stretched long across the ground. As he approached the central slab, he noticed two figures gliding silently between the outer stones, their movements synchronized as if guided by an invisible rhythm. He froze in place, watching as they bent over the central stone, making sweeping gestures with their hands. Within moments, they disappeared completely, leaving only the faintest shimmer in the cooling air. He later described the encounter as watching memories come to life, rehearsed for centuries and yet still unfamiliar. In addition to the ghostly shapes, visitors consistently report strange symbols etched into the surrounding rocks. These carvings are not always present and often appear overnight, as though formed by unseen hands, while the plateau rests in darkness. The symbols vary in complexity, from simple geometric shapes to intricate patterns resembling spirals or interconnected lines. By morning, many of these markings fade or vanish entirely, leaving only the smooth, weathered stone as if nothing had ever been there. Hikers who attempt to photograph or document the symbols often find that they are difficult to capture clearly. The etchings seem to shift subtly, resisting precise definition. A small group of backpackers once described spending an entire evening near the shrine, watching the sun sink behind the cliffs. As darkness fell, they observed several ghostly figures moving between the stones in synchronized patterns, tracing lines across the ground and performing gestures that suggested a ceremony beyond human comprehension. Hours later, when they returned with daylight, they noticed that faint symbols had appeared on several rocks around the circle symbols that had not been visible the previous evening. By noon, the markings had almost completely vanished, leaving only a subtle texture in the stone where the carvings had been. Some visitors report auditory phenomena accompanying the visual experiences. A soft hum, like distant chanting, sometimes rises from the plateau as the figures appear. Other times, there is a faint scraping or tapping, as if someone or something is carefully arranging the stones or etching the symbols while remaining unseen. These sounds are usually subtle, but when combined with the shapes and carvings, they create an atmosphere that is both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Many hikers describe a simultaneous sense of fear and awe, feeling the presence of forces beyond their understanding. Theories about the shrine's origin and purpose are numerous but remain speculative. Some suggest it was a ceremonial site used by ancient indigenous peoples, a place where seasonal rituals or spiritual observances were performed. Others believe the phenomena are a form of natural optical illusion, influenced by the unique play of light and shadow on the plateau's red sandstone. A few suggest that Myspeak Shrine exists at a convergence of subtle energies in the region, creating a persistent imprint of past activity that can occasionally be perceived by sensitive observers. Despite scientific or rational explanations, the consistency of reports over decades suggests that there is more to the shrine than can be easily explained. The most remarkable aspect of Myspeak Shrine is its ability to leave a lasting impression on those who visit. Witnesses often describe an immediate shift in their perception, a heightened awareness of the natural world, and a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. The combination of ghostly figures, shifting symbols, and subtle sounds creates a layered experience, one that blends visual, tactile, and emotional sensations into a single, unforgettable impression. Even after leaving the plateau, many visitors continue to recall the sight of shimmering figures performing their silent rituals and the ephemeral symbols that appear and vanish like memories in stone. Even in silence, the shrine maintains a sense of motion. The plateau feels alive in ways that ordinary landscapes do not. Wind whispers through the standing stones. Shadows stretch and fold in impossible ways, and the faint scent of dust and sage clings to the air. Some say that time itself behaves differently near the shrine, with hours passing unnoticed while observers are captivated by subtle movements, shifting shadows, and the faint echo of rituals carried across the plateau. Myspeak Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic locations in the Moab region. The ghostly shapes, ephemeral symbols, and ritualistic movements transform a simple circle of stones into a living, breathing site of mystery. Whether the phenomena are remnants of ancient ceremonies, natural optical illusions, or echoes of energies beyond human understanding, the shrine leaves no visitor unchanged. It is a place where the ordinary rules of the world seem suspended, where shadows tell stories, and where the stones themselves hold secrets that fade with the dawn. High in the rugged terrain of the Wasatch Mountains lies a hidden plateau where sunlight rarely reaches the ground, shrouded in a persistent mist that curls around the pines and rocks. Known to hikers and locals as Shadowy Shrine, this remote site is accessible only by winding trails that twist through dense forest and jagged cliffs. Even before reaching the clearing, visitors often describe a subtle change in the atmosphere. The air feels colder, heavier, and strangely still, as though the forest itself is holding its breath. The mist thickens the closer one gets to the shrine, reducing visibility and creating a sense of isolation that can be both unnerving and mesmerizing. The shrine consists of a series of upright stones, forming a rough circle around a central flat altar. The stones are weathered, their surfaces etched with faint grooves and patterns that suggest deliberate carving. Moss and lichen cling stubbornly to the bases, and the surrounding ground is soft with pine needles and patches of moss that give the area a secluded, almost sacred feeling. At first glance, Shadowvale's shrine appears as a tranquil, untouched spot deep in the mountains. Yet those who linger after dusk describe a profound and inexplicable shift. The mist seems alive, shadows lengthen unnaturally, and the air carries the sound of distant whispers. One of the most commonly reported phenomena at Shadowvale Shrine is the presence of shadowy forms gliding along the altar. Visitors describe them as tall, dark shapes with indistinct outlines, moving smoothly between the stones without a sound. These figures often appear to perform gestures that suggest ritualistic behavior, raising their hands toward the sky, tracing the edges of the altar, or pacing silently in circular patterns. Attempts to approach the forms are always unsuccessful. They vanish without warning whenever a visitor comes too close, leaving the clearing seemingly empty but still charged with their presence. A hiker recounted arriving at the shrine late one evening. As he stepped into the clearing, he noticed three dark shapes moving along the edges of the altar. They moved deliberately, in synchrony, bending and stretching in ways that suggested an unseen ceremony. As he reached out to get a closer look, the figures dissipated into the mist, leaving only the faint scent of pine and a cold draft that seemed to sweep across the clearing. Even though the figures were gone, he could feel their presence, as if the shrine itself remembered their movements and the ritual they performed. Accompanying the shadowy figures are whispers and faint chanting that seem to follow visitors along the misty trails leading to the shrine. These sounds are soft and elusive, often impossible to locate precisely. Sometimes, the whispers resemble hushed voices, speaking words just beyond comprehension. Other times, they coalesce into a rhythmic chant that seems almost musical in its cadence. Visitors report that the sounds intensify when they pause to observe the clearing, creating the impression that the shrine is responding to their presence. One woman described walking along the misty path to the shrine and hearing a chorus of low murmurs echoing around the trees. When she stopped, the voices fell silent, only to resume as she continued her approach, giving the sensation that the trail itself was alive and aware. The interplay of shadow, mist, and sound contributes to an overwhelming sense of atmosphere. The mist acts as both veil and mirror, diffusing light, softening shapes, and amplifying the impression of movement. Shadows stretch and shift along the stones, sometimes appearing humanoid, even in the absence of actual forms. The chanting and whispers, combined with the visual illusions created by the mist, create a multi-sensory experience that visitors often describe as hypnotic. Some hikers report losing track of time, feeling as though hours pass in what seems like minutes, entirely absorbed in the enigmatic environment of the shrine. Visitors also describe tactile sensations that accompany the auditory and visual phenomena. Cold drafts sweep across the clearing unexpectedly, brushing against skin even when no wind is apparent. Some hikers report feeling an almost imperceptible pressure on their shoulders or back, as if unseen presences are walking beside them along the misty paths. While these sensations are not aggressive, they add to the sense that Shadowvale Shrine is inhabited by forces that exist outside normal perception. The combination of what can be seen, heard, and felt produces an experience that lingers long after leaving the mountains. Local lore surrounding Shadowvale Shrine is varied but consistent in one key aspect. The site is a place of ritual and memory. Some believe the shrine was once used by ancient inhabitants of the Wasatch region, a ceremonial location where seasonal rites or spiritual observances were performed. Others suggest the shadowy forms are echoes of these rituals, lingering in the air and mist, replaying gestures and movements for those who are sensitive enough to perceive them. Skeptics propose natural explanations, wind, mist, and echoing acoustics, but even those who attempt to rationalize the phenomena admit that the consistency of the reports is striking. Across decades, hikers describe similar experiences: shadowy forms, whispers, chanting, and the feeling of being observed. Even without witnessing the figures or hearing the sounds, visitors describe a palpable sense of energy at the shrine. The altar seems to resonate with the surrounding environment, amplifying the smallest noises, reflecting the mist in ways that create depth and motion, and drawing attention to the worn grooves and patterns etched into the stones. Every step into the clearing feels significant, as though the visitor is entering a space where ordinary rules of perception do not fully apply. Shadowvale Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic locations in the Wasatch Mountains. The combination of gliding shadows, whispering chants, and atmospheric mist transforms a simple circle of stones into a living experience that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. Those who visit are often left with a deep impression of mystery, a sense of having glimpsed something ancient and hidden within the forest. The shrine challenges perception, blending the natural and the supernatural into a space where shadows move with intent. Whispers carry the weight of unseen ritual, and the mist itself seems to guide every step along the path. For anyone seeking the extraordinary, Shadowvale Shrine is a place where the ordinary dissolves into the enigmatic, where the forest holds secrets in shadow and sound. The experiences linger long after leaving, carried in memory like echoes of the shrine's silent ceremonies, waiting for those who might return to witness them once again. High in the rugged terrain of the Wasatch Mountains lies a hidden plateau where sunlight rarely reaches the ground, shrouded in a persistent mist that curls around the pines and rocks. Known to hikers and locals as Shadowy Shrine, this remote site is accessible only by winding trails that twist through dense forest and jagged cliffs. Even before reaching the clearing, visitors often describe a subtle change in the atmosphere. The air feels colder, heavier, Some hikers report losing track of time, feeling as though hours pass in what seems like minutes, entirely absorbed in the enigmatic environment of the shrine. Visitors also describe tactile sensations that accompany the auditory and visual phenomena. Local lore surrounding Shadow Vale Shrine is varied but consistent in one key aspect. The site is a place of ritual and memory. The combination of gliding shadows, whispering chants, and atmospheric mist transforms a simple circle of stones into a living experience that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. Those who visit are often left with a deep impression of mystery, a sense of having glimpsed something ancient and hidden within the forest. The shrine challenges perception, blending the natural and the supernatural into a space where shadows move with intent. Whispers carry the weight of unseen ritual, and the mist itself seems to guide every step along the path. For anyone seeking the extraordinary, Shadowy Vale Shrine is a place where the ordinary dissolves into the enigmatic, where the forest holds secrets in shadow and sound, and where each visitor is left to ponder what is real and what is only perceived through the veil of mist. The experiences linger long after leaving, carried in memory like echoes of the shrine's silent ceremonies, waiting for those who might return to witness them once again. Hidden high in the wooded slopes surrounding Park City lies a secluded plateau known to a select few as Hollowrack Shrine. The trail to reach it winds through dense pines, over jagged rock formations, and along narrow ridges that seem to drop sharply into shadowed valleys below. Even during daylight, the forest around the shrine feels unusually quiet. The wind carries a crisp, almost tangible chill, and the distant echo of rustling leaves is amplified in the silence. Hikers who approach the shrine for the first time often describe a sudden sense of being observed, a quiet awareness that grows stronger with each step closer to the plateau. The shrine itself is modest, yet unmistakable in its deliberate construction. A series of stones, upright and weathered, forms a loose circle around a central altar carved from a flat slab of granite. The carvings on the stones are faint but intricate, featuring geometric shapes and abstract symbols whose meaning has been lost to time. Moss and lichen cling stubbornly to the stones, and the ground around the shrine is soft with fallen needles and patches of earth that collect the detritus of the surrounding forest. Even in daylight, the site has a weighty presence, as if the stones themselves remember the hands that shaped them and the rituals performed upon them. Most visitors are drawn to Hollowrock Shrine for its fleeting figures that appear near the carved stones. Witnesses describe shapes that move silently and with purpose, appearing only for brief moments before disappearing into the shadows or mist. These forms are often described as human-like but lacking distinct features, almost as though they are constructed from shadow itself. Some figures are seen bending over the central altar, performing gestures that suggest a ceremonial practice, while others pace along the perimeter of the stone circle in slow, deliberate movements. Attempts to approach the figures always fail. They vanish the instant direct observation is attempted, leaving only the impression of motion in their wake. One visitor recounted an encounter at dusk, arriving as the sun cast long shadows across the plateau. As he walked toward the altar, he noticed a faint figure kneeling near one of the stones. The shape moved gracefully, tracing a pattern along the stone surface with invisible hands. When he stepped closer, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the air and a sudden drop in temperature. The experience was unsettling, yet mesmerizing, as if he had witnessed a moment preserved outside of ordinary time, replayed in the quiet solitude of the forest. Accompanying the visual phenomena are cold gusts that carry soft chants and the faint aroma of incense or burning herbs. Visitors frequently report feeling sudden drafts that sweep across the clearing, brushing their skin without moving the surrounding foliage. Within these gusts, faint chanting can be heard, low, rhythmic murmurs that seem to echo from stone to stone. The sounds are subtle yet pervasive, sometimes forming brief phrases that vanish as quickly as they appear. Many hikers describe a faint scent of smoke, earthy and sweet, carried on the same wind, though no fire is ever found. The combination of sound, temperature, and smell contributes to an uncanny sense of ceremony, as though invisible participants continue an ancient ritual for those who happen upon it. The interaction of the figures, gusts, and sensory details creates an atmosphere that is both mesmerizing and disquieting. Shadows stretch and twist across the stone surfaces, and the flickering mist among the trees adds depth and ambiguity to the fleeting shapes. Visitors often report that time seems to behave differently near the shrine. Minutes can stretch into hours, and one's perception of distance and scale becomes unreliable. The more one focuses on the phenomena, the more vivid and elaborate they become, creating a hypnotic effect that draws observers deeper into the shrine's enigmatic presence. Local lore suggests that Hallarak Shrine may have been a ceremonial site for early inhabitants of the Park City region, a place where offerings and rituals were made to honor the spirits of the mountains and forests. Some suggest that the faint incense scent and rhythmic chanting are echoes of these ancient practices, preserved in the air by the stones themselves. Others speculate that the figures are spirits or manifestations of the forest's energy, replaying gestures and rituals long after their creators have vanished. Regardless of the origin, the shrine's mysterious and consistent phenomena continue to captivate all who encounter it. Even without witnessing the figures or hearing the chants, visitors often leave with a sense of awe and unease. The stones themselves seem to hold a silent memory, resonating with energy that heightens awareness and sensitivity. Every step across the plateau feels purposeful, every movement accompanied by a faint sense of observation. The lingering chill in the air and the subtle scent of herbs and incense contribute to an experience that is both tangible and elusive, leaving a deep impression on those who visit. Hikers who stay late into the evening sometimes report multiple figures appearing simultaneously, moving in coordinated patterns that suggest a ritualistic structure. The central altar becomes the focal point of their movements, with gestures repeated in careful rhythm. Even after the figures vanish, the impression of their presence remains, carried in the shifting shadows, the cool air, and the faint aroma lingering in the mist. Visitors consistently describe a sensation of being touched by history, of encountering something ancient and purposeful that exists just beyond ordinary perception. Hallarak Shrine remains one of Park City's most enigmatic locations. Its fleeting figures, cold gusts, and ethereal sensory cues transform a simple clearing of stones into a living, immersive experience. Those who visit are left with memories that defy simple explanation, impressions of a place where shadows move with intent. Wind carries echoes of ceremonies long past, and the forest itself seems alive with secrets. Even in silence, the shrine maintains a quiet presence. The carved stones, the altar, and the plateau seem attuned to those who enter, responding subtly to attention and observation. Shadows stretch and shift, scents linger in the mist, and the faint chanting reverberates in memory long after the plateau has been left behind. Hallarak Shrine is a place where the natural and supernatural intersect, where visitors can feel the weight of history and the persistence of ritual, and where the fleeting glimpses of shadowed forms create an experience that remains etched in the mind for years to come. For anyone seeking the mysterious or the extraordinary, Hallarak Shrine offers a space where the ordinary dissolves into the enigmatic. Figures appear and vanish, Cold gusts carry whispers and incense, and the stones themselves seem to hold secrets that are revealed only to those willing to witness the quiet, ritualistic heartbeat of the mountain plateau. It is a location where memory, sensation, and the unknown converge, leaving every visitor with a lasting impression of the shrine's haunting, elusive presence. When the hiker stepped closer to observe, the forms dissolved into the night, leaving only a faint shimmer and the chill of desert air. The memory of the figure's gestures lingered, etched into the mind as clearly as if recorded by the eyes themselves. Adding to the shrine's haunting atmosphere are ghostly flames that flicker without source. Visitors often report seeing small, bluish-orange flames dancing near the stones or along the edges of the plateau. These flames appear entirely detached from any fuel or material source, flickering in patterns that mimic the gestures of the figures. Sometimes the flames rise and fall, as though reacting to the movements of the shadowy forms, and at other times they pulse rhythmically, casting elongated shadows across the surrounding rocks. The flames are cold to the touch, and attempts to get close often result in them vanishing entirely. Many describe the experience as surreal, a visual echo of some ancient ceremony performed in silence under the light of the moon. Auditory phenomena also accompany the visual elements of Moonlit Peak Shrine. Some hikers report faint murmurs or low, rhythmic chanting carried on the night wind. The sounds are subtle, sometimes indistinguishable from the natural echoing of the canyon, yet consistent in a way that suggests intentionality. Other visitors describe hearing soft footsteps circling the clearing, though no one is present. The combination of sight, sound, and temperature changes. The cool desert air brushing unexpectedly across the skin creates a multisensory experience that lingers long after leaving the plateau. Local legends surrounding the shrine suggest that moonlit Peak was once a ceremonial site for ancient inhabitants of the region. Offerings, rituals, and seasonal observances may have been performed here to honor the spirits of the canyons or the cycles of the moon. Some believe the shadowy figures are echoes of these rituals, replaying movements bound to the stones and the moonlight. Others suggest that the ghostly flames are manifestations of energy left behind by those who once gathered at the altar, a luminous residue of ancient devotion. Skeptics attribute the phenomena to optical illusions caused by moonlight and rock formations. Yet the consistency of reports over decades makes clear that Moonlit Peak Shrine continues to produce experiences that defy simple explanation. Visitors consistently note that the shrine leaves a lasting impression. Even those who do not witness the figures or the flames report a feeling of quiet reverence. The central altar seems to resonate subtly with its surroundings, amplifying sounds, bending shadows, and capturing light in unusual ways. Every step across the plateau feels significant. Every movement observed through the shifting moonlight carries weight. Hikers often leave with an enhanced awareness of the desert's subtle energies and a lingering sense of having touched something timeless and sacred. For those who linger into the night, the experience becomes increasingly immersive. The combination of shadowy figures, ghostly flames, and rhythmic, almost imperceptible chanting creates a scene that is both hypnotic and unsettling. Observers describe losing track of time, absorbed by the silent ceremony replayed before them. Even after leaving the plateau, the memory of Moonlit Peak Shrine endures. The gestures of the figures, the flicker of unearthly flames, and the profound stillness of the moonlit stones remain vivid, echoing in thought, like a distant ritual calling across centuries. Moonlit Peak Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic locations in the Moab region. Its moonlit figures, silent gestures, and ethereal flames transform a simple circle of stones into a space where the ordinary rules of perception do not apply. Visitors leave changed, haunted by glimpses of what may be beyond the visible world, aware that the shrine holds secrets preserved in shadow and light, ritual and memory. For anyone seeking an encounter with the mysterious Moonlit Peak offers a plateau where the night itself becomes a stage, and the ancient, ghostly ceremonies continue silently under the watchful glow of the moon. Deep within the rugged terrain of the Uinta Mountains lies a secluded plateau known as Obsidian Shrine. The path to reach it is treacherous, winding through dense forests, rocky ledges, and steep inclines that test even the most experienced hikers. As travelers ascend, the air grows cooler and heavier, carrying the faint scent of pine and the earthy aroma of damp stone. Even in broad daylight, the plateau exudes an uncanny stillness. Hikers often describe a sensation of being watched, a subtle awareness that intensifies the closer one gets to the shrine. The isolation of the location, coupled with the dramatic scenery of jagged peaks and deep valleys, amplifies the shrine's mysterious presence, making each step toward it feel like entering another world. The shrine itself is a modest yet deliberate construction. A series of dark, jagged stones form a rough circle around a central altar carved from blackened granite. The stones bear faint etchings of geometric patterns and obscure symbols whose meanings have been lost over the centuries. Moss and lichen cling stubbornly to the bases of the stones, softening the edges, while the ground within the circle is scattered with red-brown dust, small stones, and occasional pine needles. The altar appears to have been smoothed and worn by centuries of wind and weather, yet there is an undeniable sense that it was once the focal point of deliberate ceremonies. Even when unoccupied, the area feels alive, charged with an energy that visitors cannot easily explain. Most reports of paranormal activity at Obsidian Shrine center on echoes of chanting and faint footsteps circling the altar. Visitors describe hearing low, rhythmic murmurs that seem to emanate from the stones themselves, as though some invisible presence is performing a ritual long forgotten by the living. The chanting is almost imperceptible at times, barely distinguishable from the wind rustling through the trees or the distant echo of wildlife. Yet, for those who pause to listen, the sounds become increasingly distinct, forming patterns and rhythms that feel deliberate and intentional. Footsteps are heard, circling the altar, sometimes overlapping with the chanting, creating the sensation that invisible participants move among the stones, performing a ceremony that is both ancient and continuous. Visual phenomena are equally striking. Many visitors report seeing shadowy figures appearing on rocky ledges surrounding the shrine. These forms are described as tall and thin, their outlines blurred and indistinct. They glide along the rocks, moving with deliberate, silent gestures, sometimes pausing to bend over the altar or trace invisible lines along the stone surfaces. Attempts to approach or focus on the figures are always met with sudden disappearance. They vanish into the shadows or mist, leaving no trace behind. Witnesses consistently note that these figures appear bound to specific routines or movements, suggesting that they are replaying some ritual over and over, independent of human observers. One hiker recounted an experience shortly after dusk. The sun had dipped behind the jagged peaks, leaving the shrine bathed in a muted twilight. As she stepped into the clearing, she noticed a shadowed figure moving along a ledge above the altar. Its gestures were deliberate, almost hypnotic, bending and stretching in patterns that felt like a silent dance. When she tried to move closer for a better view, the figure dissolved into the evening shadows, leaving only the faint sensation of presence and a sudden chill in the air. The echo of footsteps continued to circle the altar, though no one else was visible, and she could hear the soft hum of chanting as if carried from some hidden, unseen choir. Other visitors described similar auditory and visual phenomena, often accompanied by subtle environmental changes. Cold gusts sweep across the shrine unexpectedly, brushing the skin even when the surrounding trees remain still. Shadows shift in unnatural ways, stretching across the stones and canyon walls. The etchings on the altar and surrounding stones sometimes appear sharper, more pronounced, as if responding to the presence of observers. Many hikers describe a feeling of weight or tension in the air, as though the shrine itself is aware of their presence and adjusting to it, maintaining the integrity of its rituals even without a visible audience. Local lore surrounding Obsidian Shrine is varied. Some believe the site was used by indigenous peoples for ceremonial purposes, a sacred location where offerings were made to honor spirits of the mountains and forest. Others suggest that the echoes and figures are remnants of these rituals, preserved in the air and stones as a kind of memory that replays for those sensitive enough to perceive it. Skeptics argued that the phenomena could be explained by wind patterns, acoustics, and optical illusions created by shadows on the rocky terrain. However, the consistency of reports over decades, describing similar sounds, figures, and sensations, indicates that the shrine produces experiences beyond simple natural phenomena. Even without witnessing the shadowy figures or hearing the chanting, visitors consistently describe a profound sense of presence. The altar seems to resonate with its surroundings, amplifying even the smallest sounds and capturing subtle shifts in light. Every step within the clearing feels deliberate. Every movement observed through the mist or shadows carries weight. Hikers often leave with heightened awareness, feeling as though they have glimpsed a layer of reality hidden beneath ordinary perception. For those who linger after dusk, the experience becomes increasingly immersive. The combination of echoing chants, circling footsteps, and gliding shadowy figures creates a scene both mesmerizing and unsettling. Time appears to slow, with minutes stretching into hours, as observers are absorbed by the quiet rituals replayed before them. Even after leaving, the memory of Obsidian Shrine lingers. The soft murmurs, the sensation of presence, and the silhouettes of figures on the ledges remain vivid, echoing like distant ceremonies across the mind. Obsidian Shrine remains one of the most mysterious locations in the Uinta Mountains. Its chorus of unseen participants, gliding shadow figures, and echoing footsteps transform a simple circle of stones into a space where the ordinary rules of perception do not apply. Visitors are left with a lasting impression of a place where shadows move with intent. Whispers carry the weight of forgotten rituals, and the land itself seems alive with memory. Those who venture here cannot help but feel they have encountered something timeless, a place where human presence is fleeting. Yet the ancient ceremonies continue, preserved in stone, shadow, and sound. In the stillness of the mountains, where the forest holds secrets in mist and stone. Obsidian Shrine waits for those who dare to step across its plateau. Figures glide along, ledges, chants echo in the wind, and footsteps circle the altar as if time itself has slowed to honor the rituals that endure beyond the reach of human eyes. It is a site where memory, shadow, and the supernatural converge, leaving every visitor with a haunting impression of the shrine's elusive, otherworldly presence. High within the misty cliffs of Zion National Park lies a remote and enigmatic site known as Fog Cliff Shrine. The trail leading to it is narrow and winding, carved along steep rock faces and shadowed by towering sandstone formations. Even during daylight, the canyon seems to close in around travelers, muffling sound and bending light in ways that create an uncanny sense of isolation. Hikers often describe a subtle shift in the air as they approach the plateau where the shrine stands, a sensation that is difficult to describe, yet impossible to ignore. The mist drifts in from the canyon's edges, curling through the trees and around jagged rocks, making every step feel both cautious and sacred. Ancient symbols, nearly indecipherable, are etched into the stone surfaces, their meaning long forgotten. Small ledges and outcroppings surround the altar, creating natural perches that seem perfectly suited for observation. Though what might be observed remains a mystery. Even when empty, the clearing has an almost sentient presence, a feeling that the land is aware of those who step within its boundaries. The moss, lichen, and desert flora that cling to the stones seem to thrive in the constant mist, adding a touch of life to an otherwise austere and enigmatic setting. Visitors are often drawn to Fog Cliff Shrine because of the whispers in unknown languages that seem to drift through the canyon. These voices are soft, carried by the shifting fog, and impossible to trace to any source. The words are indecipherable, yet their cadence is rhythmic and purposeful, as though forming chants that have persisted through centuries. Sometimes the whispers overlap, creating a layered, almost musical effect. Hikers report that the voices are faintest when they first arrive, growing stronger as they linger near the altar. These forms are indistinct, dark silhouettes that seem partially made of mist. They move with a purpose, sometimes tracing the perimeter of the stone circle, at other times leaping or twisting across ledges in ways that defy natural movement. Attempts to approach these figures invariably fail. They vanish or dissolve into the fog when directly observed, leaving only the faint impression of motion behind. Many visitors describe a sense of awe, mixed with unease, feeling as though they are witnessing rituals performed beyond the laws of physics. Gestures that continue regardless of human presence. One hiker recounted arriving at the shrine just after sunset. The canyon was bathed in soft, gray twilight, the mist drifting through the trees and curling around the stones. As she approached the central altar, she noticed a shadow stretch across the clearing, bending and twisting in ways that seemed impossible. At the same time, faint chanting could be heard, layering over the natural sounds of the forest, the wind through the pines, the distant cry of a bird. When she stepped closer to get a better view, the shadow dissolved into the fog, leaving the clearing empty but filled with the lingering resonance of movement and sound. The memory of the figure's gestures remained vivid, as though etched into the surrounding air. Environmental changes add to the shrine's mystique. Cold drafts sweep through the clearing unexpectedly, brushing against skin without stirring nearby branches. Light seems to bend differently within the stone circle, casting shadows that shift and stretch independently of the sun. Even the etchings on the stones appear to respond subtly to observation, becoming more defined when focused upon, and fading again when attention wavers. Visitors often remark that these effects create a sense of being inside a living tableau, where every element, sound, shadow, and air is part of a larger, unknowable design. Local legends suggest that Fogcliff Shrine may have been used by ancient inhabitants of the Zion region for ceremonial purposes, offering a place to commune with natural or spiritual forces. Some claim the whispering voices are echoes of these rituals, replaying endlessly for those who venture near. Others suggest the shadowy figures are manifestations of energy left behind, performing actions bound to the stones and trees of the clearing. Skeptics argue that the mist, wind, and light create illusions, but the consistency of reports over decades, descriptions of whispers, impossible movements, and shifting shadows makes it clear that the shrine produces experiences beyond simple natural explanations. Even without witnessing the shadows or hearing the chanting, visitors consistently report a sense of profound presence at Fogcliff Shrine. High above the winding canyons of Moab, perched on a rocky plateau, lies a site known to locals and hikers as Crimson Rock Shrine. The trail leading to it is narrow and treacherous, carved into the red sandstone cliffs and lined with jagged rock formations. Even during daylight, the plateau feels isolated and sacred. The air grows noticeably cooler as visitors ascend, carrying the earthy scent of desert stone and the faint aroma of scrub and dry moss. The plateau seems removed from the ordinary world, a place where silence dominates, and every step echoes against the cliffs. Hikers often report a feeling of being observed long before reaching the shrine, a quiet awareness that heightens anticipation and unease. The shrine itself is formed of a circle of jagged stones surrounding a central flat altar. The stones are weathered but deliberate, their edges smoothed by centuries of wind and rain. Deep red veins run through the rock, giving the plateau a color and intensity that matches its name. Etchings on the stones suggest ancient patterns and symbols whose meanings are no longer known. Small crevices collect desert dust, and resilient tufts of vegetation cling stubbornly to the stone surfaces. Witnesses describe figures appearing at the altar, their outlines dark and indistinct against the crimson rocks. The shapes move with deliberate, silent gestures, raising their arms, bending over the altar, or pacing in measured, ceremonial steps. The figures appear completely unaware of human presence, bound to the ritual they perform. Attempts to approach them fail. The figures vanish the moment someone moves too close, leaving only the faint impression of movement in the air and an eerie stillness that lingers over the stones. One hiker recalled arriving as the sun began to fade, casting long shadows across the plateau. 3 shadowed forms appeared near the central altar, moving with a rhythm that seemed ancient and intentional. Perhaps the most striking feature of Crimson Rock's shrine is the red light that seems to emanate from the stones themselves. Visitors often report a subtle, pulsating glow that intensifies as dusk deepens into night. This glow enhances the otherworldly atmosphere of the shrine, casting long, distorted shadows across the plateau and highlighting the figures as they move through the fading light. Shadows seem to stretch and shift independently of the sun's position, and the etched symbols on the stones sometimes appear sharper or more pronounced when observed closely. These subtle changes amplify the sense of immersion, making the experience of visiting the shrine both mesmerizing and unsettling. Local legends suggest that Crimson Rock Shrine was a ceremonial site used by ancient inhabitants of the region. Its dusk-bound figures, crimson glow, and silent ceremonial energy transform a simple circle of stones into a space where the ordinary rules of perception do not apply. Visitors leave with a lasting impression of a site where shadows move with intent, light carries memory, and the plateau itself seems alive. For those seeking the extraordinary, Crimson Rock Shrine offers a place where the desert, stone, and unseen forces converge, and where the rituals of the past continue silently under the blood-red glow of the rocks. Hidden deep within the dense forests of the Wasatch Mountains lies a secluded plateau known as Dark Pine Shrine. Reaching it requires navigating narrow trails lined with towering pine trees and jagged rock formations. The path climbs steadily, winding through shadowed valleys and over rocky outcrops that jut sharply into the forest. Even during daylight, the air around the shrine is heavy with an almost tangible stillness. Hikers frequently describe a sensation of being watched, a subtle awareness that seems to grow stronger the closer they come to the shrine. The forest feels alive, each gust of wind and rustle of needles carrying the sense that visitors are intruding on a place that has existed long before their arrival. The shrine itself is simple, yet deliberate. A circle of tall, dark stones surrounds a central altar carved from granite. The stones bear faint geometric markings and obscure symbols, worn smooth by centuries of weathering. Moss and lichen cling stubbornly to the surfaces, adding a layer of life to the otherwise austere setting. The ground within the circle is scattered with pine needles, small rocks, and patches of soft earth. Even when empty, the shrine seems to radiate a presence, a silent energy that compels visitors to move slowly and respectfully across the plateau. Most encounters at Dark Pine Shrine occur in the late afternoon or evening. Witnesses report fleeting figures pacing silently around the altar, their movements deliberate and rhythmic. These forms are dark and indistinct, often described as humanoid, but with blurred features that make them difficult to identify. They appear to move with purpose, circling the altar or gliding along the edge of the stone perimeter. Attempts to approach the figures invariably result in their disappearance. They vanish into the shadows of the trees or dissolve into the air itself, leaving behind only a faint sense of presence. Many visitors describe a feeling of awe mixed with unease, as though they are observing a ritual that has persisted beyond human memory. One hiker recalled arriving at the shrine just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau. As she stepped into the clearing, a shadowy figure emerged near the altar, pacing slowly and deliberately. Its movements were fluid yet precise, as if performing a ceremony dictated by some ancient rule. When she attempted to step closer, the figure dissolved into the surrounding darkness, leaving only the faint echo of motion and a lingering sense of being observed. Even after the figure vanished, the air remained heavy with the presence of unseen participants. And a chill swept across the clearing, brushing against her skin without disturbing the surrounding pine needles. Adding to the shrine's haunting atmosphere are the cold drafts that sweep unexpectedly across the plateau. Visitors frequently report sudden gusts of icy air, even on warm summer evenings. These drafts move in ways that defy explanation, flowing through the circle of stones and along the forest floor without any apparent source. The sudden temperature drops heighten the feeling of unease, reinforcing the sense that the shrine is alive with unseen energy. Many hikers describe shivers that persist long after leaving the plateau, as if the cold has left a lasting imprint on both body and memory. Accompanying the visual and environmental phenomena are whispers of old rituals that echo endlessly through the forest. These sounds are soft and often indecipherable, carried on the wind and blending seamlessly with the natural rustling of trees and the distant call of wildlife. The whispers sometimes form patterns, repeating phrases or rhythms that suggest deliberate recitation. Some visitors describe hearing multiple layers of voice, overlapping and interweaving in ways that feel both chaotic and harmonious. The auditory experience, combined with the fleeting figures and cold drafts, creates an immersive atmosphere that is at once mesmerizing and disquieting. Local legends suggest that Dark Pine Shrine may have been a ceremonial site used by early inhabitants of the Wasatch region. Offerings, prayers, and seasonal rituals could have been performed at the altar to honor spirits of the forest and mountains. Some believe the shadowy figures are echoes of these ceremonies, manifestations of energy bound to the stones and the clearing. Others suggest that the whispers are remnants of incantations repeated for generations, preserved in the air and trees for those sensitive enough to perceive them. Skeptics attribute the experiences to wind patterns, shadows, and optical illusions. But the consistency of reports over decades indicates that the shrine produces phenomena beyond simple explanation. Even without witnessing the figures or hearing the whispers, visitors report a profound sense of presence at the shrine. The stones seem to resonate subtly with their surroundings, amplifying even faint sounds and movements. Every step across the plateau feels deliberate. Every glance toward the trees or rocks carries weight. Many hikers describe a heightened awareness, a sense that they have glimpsed a dimension of the forest that is normally hidden from human perception. For those who linger into evening, the experience becomes increasingly immersive. The combination of fleeting figures, cold drafts, and endless whispers creates a hypnotic tableau. Time seems to stretch, with minutes expanding into hours, as observers are drawn into the silent rituals replayed around the altar. Even after leaving the shrine, the impressions remain vivid. The sensation of being watched, the faint traces of motion, and the whispers echoing through memory long after the plateau is out of sight. Dark Pine Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic locations in the Wasatch Mountains. Its shadowed figures, mysterious cold, and eternal whispers transform a simple circle of stones into a space where the ordinary rules of perception do not apply. Visitors leave with a lasting impression of a place alive with memory, where ancient ceremonies persist beyond human observation, and where the forest itself seems to guard secrets older than any living generation. For those seeking an encounter with the mysterious, Dark Pine Shrine offers a plateau where shadows, sound, and the unseen converge, leaving every visitor with a haunting and unforgettable experience. Perched high on a remote plateau within the Grand Staircase region, Holomis Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic and haunting locations in the area. The journey to the shrine is a challenge in itself, requiring passage through rugged sandstone cliffs, narrow trails, and uneven rocky terrain. Even during the day, the air along the ascent carries a peculiar stillness, as if the land anticipates the presence of outsiders. Visitors often describe a feeling of weighty quiet, a sense that the plateau itself watches those who venture near. Mist rises unpredictably from the canyon below, curling around trees and rocks, giving the entire area a surreal, otherworldly quality that grows more pronounced as one approaches the shrine. The shrine is formed of a circle of rough, jagged stones surrounding a central altar carved directly from the native sandstone. Even when empty, the shrine radiates an energy that is difficult to describe, as though it retains the memory of countless rituals performed over the centuries. Sparse desert vegetation clings to cracks in the stone, adding a fragile contrast to the hard, weathered surfaces. Visitors to Holomis Shrine frequently report sudden chills that sweep across the plateau without warning. The temperature seems to drop inexplicably, brushing against skin even on warm days. These cold drafts move through the clearing in unpredictable ways, creating a sensation of presence that cannot be easily explained. Hikers often pause in response, feeling an invisible weight pressing on their senses, as if unseen observers are circling or watching. The chill, combined with the visual and auditory phenomena reported at the shrine, contributes to an experience that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is flickering lights that appear near the altar and along the surrounding rocks. These lights are not associated with fire or any natural source. They appear to shimmer and pulse, sometimes shifting colors from soft orange to a bluish-white glow. Observers often describe the lights as moving in tandem with unseen figures, flickering rhythmically as though mirroring gestures that occur in another realm. Attempts to approach or investigate the lights typically result in them vanishing entirely, leaving the clearing in semi-darkness punctuated only by the fading mist and long shadows. The light's behavior adds an ethereal, hypnotic quality to the shrine, making the experience feel like a convergence of past and present, visible and invisible. Auditory phenomena further enhance Hallowmas shrines' haunting reputation. Visitors frequently report ghostly chanting, low and rhythmic, carried on the wind or seemingly resonating from the stones themselves. The words are indistinct, often incomprehensible, yet they form patterns that feel deliberate. Sometimes the chanting overlaps with other faint sounds, footsteps, the rustle of clothing, or the scraping of stone. Many hikers describe the voices as echoing endlessly through the surrounding canyon, as if the shrine projects its rituals far beyond the clearing itself. The chanting seems to respond to the presence of observers, growing louder when someone pauses near the altar and fading when attention drifts elsewhere. Perhaps the most unnerving phenomena are the shadowy forms that glide between the rocks. Observers describe them as humanoid in shape, yet indistinct, dark silhouettes that move fluidly and silently. These forms appear to interact with the landscape, sometimes pacing near the altar, sometimes disappearing behind outcroppings, only to reappear elsewhere. Attempts to approach them invariably fail. The figures vanish when directly observed, leaving only the sense of movement and presence behind. One hiker described arriving at Hallowmas Shrine just after twilight. At the same moment, faint flickering lights appeared along the rocks, casting distorted shadows across the plateau. Low chanting rose on the wind, carrying tones that seemed almost musical, yet profoundly alien. When she attempted to move closer, the figure dissolved into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of movement and a sudden chill that swept across the clearing. She remained rooted in place, entranced by the interplay of light, shadow, and sound, feeling the shrine's presence as tangibly as the cold against her skin. The flickering lights may represent residual energy or spiritual traces left behind, while the cold drafts and chanting are manifestations of the shrine's memory and purpose. Skeptics attribute the experiences to wind, light refraction, and natural acoustics. But the consistency of reports over decades, describing identical movements, sounds, and sensations, indicates that the site produces experiences beyond ordinary explanation. Even without witnessing the lights or forms, visitors consistently report a profound sense of presence at Hallowmas Shrine. The clearing seems to resonate with its surroundings, amplifying faint sounds and casting shadows that appear to shift independently of sunlight. Hikers leave with a heightened awareness, feeling as though they have glimpsed a realm beyond ordinary perception. A space where past and present coexist and unseen forces maintain their rituals. For those who linger after sunset, the experience deepens. The combination of sudden chills, flickering lights, ghostly chanting, and gliding shadow forms creates a hypnotic tableau. And the movement of unseen figures linger in memory, leaving a haunting impression of a place alive with history and energy. Visitors leave with the sense that the shrine is alive, that rituals continue unseen, and that the land itself holds memories older than any living generation. And the supernatural converge, creating an unforgettable experience that lingers long after the last mist fades from the canyon. Mist often drifts through the trees and along the plateau, curling over rocks and around the stones of the shrine, giving the entire area a surreal, otherworldly quality that deepens after dusk. Visitors report figures appearing near the altar, carrying offerings. These forms are shadowy and indistinct, often humanoid but with features obscured by darkness or mist. They move with quiet deliberation, placing objects, raising arms, or pacing along the stone perimeter. In addition to the figures, hikers frequently find unexplained footprints in the dust and soft soil around the altar. The prints sometimes form trails that circle the altar or lead toward rocky ledges, only to vanish abruptly at cliff edges or disappear into shadows. Observers report a sense of unease when noticing these footprints, as though the shrine itself is recording the passage of beings no longer visible to human eyes. Another consistent phenomenon is the presence of shadowy forms gliding between rocks and trees. Many visitors describe a feeling of awe mingled with unease, as though they are witnessing rituals performed in another dimension, beyond the understanding of the living. One hiker described an experience late at night, arriving at the shrine under a waning moon. The footprints remained, partially illuminated by the moonlight, a silent reminder of the unseen presence that had just passed through the clearing. Environmental factors contribute to the shrine's unsettling atmosphere. Sudden cold drafts sweep through the plateau, brushing the skin unexpectedly, even on warm summer nights. Shadows stretch and twist independently of the moon's position, and the etched symbols on the stones sometimes appear sharper or more prominent when closely observed. These subtle changes enhance the immersive experience, making the clearing feel like a living stage where unseen rituals are replayed endlessly. Time appears to slow as visitors witness gestures and movements that seem independent of human observation. Blackcliff Shrine remains one of the most enigmatic locations near Park City. Its midnight figures, mysterious footprints, and gliding shadows transform a simple circle of stones into a place where ordinary perception does not apply. Visitors leave with the sense that the shrine is alive, that rituals continue beyond human observation, and that the land itself holds memories older than any living generation. For those willing to venture to its remote plateau, Blackcliff Shrine offers an encounter with the mysterious, a space where shadow, sound, and unseen forces converge to create an experience that lingers long after the mist has cleared. High in the Uintas, nestled among jagged peaks and dense pine forests, lies the remote and enigmatic mist-bound shrine. The journey to the site is challenging, requiring careful navigation over rocky trails and narrow ridges. Even during the day, the air is thick with mist that drifts unpredictably through the trees and along the cliffs. The forest feels alive, filled with shadows that twist and shift with the light, giving the plateau a sense of timelessness. Hikers report an immediate change in atmosphere as they approach the clearing where the shrine stands. The wind slows, the forest quiets, and a heavy stillness settles over the rocks and trees. It is as if the very landscape itself is aware of intruders. The shrine is composed of a circle of tall, dark stones surrounding a flat altar carved from native granite. Ancient symbols are etched into the stones, their shapes worn smooth by centuries of weather and erosion. Small ledges and rocky outcroppings surround the clearing, creating natural vantage points. Even when empty, the shrine radiates a presence, a silent energy that draws visitors toward the center, compelling them to move carefully across the uneven terrain. Moss and lichen cling stubbornly to the stones, and patches of soft earth and pine needles carpet the ground. The combination of isolation, elevation, and natural formations gives the shrine a feeling of otherworldliness, as though it exists partially out of time. Most accounts of paranormal activity at Mistbound Shrine occur during early morning or twilight, when the mist thickens and visibility drops. Visitors often report ghostly silhouettes repeating rituals around the altar. They raise their arms, bend, pace, or kneel at the altar, performing movements that feel deeply intentional. Attempts to approach the figures usually result in them vanishing, leaving behind only a fleeting impression of motion and a lingering sense of presence. Many hikers describe awe mixed with unease, as though they are witnessing ceremonies performed outside the normal flow of time. Alongside the apparitions, visitors often notice strange symbols appearing on the ground overnight. They seem fresh when discovered, though no one has seen them created. Some patterns form circles around the stones. Others lead toward nearby ledges or disappear abruptly at the edges of cliffs. The symbols' meanings are unknown, and they do not match any contemporary alphabets or signs, leaving observers puzzled and fascinated. Hikers report that the symbols often vanish or fade with the morning light, as if tied to the mist itself or the energy that animates the shrine. Environmental factors enhance the shrine's haunting atmosphere. Cold drafts sweep unpredictably through the clearing, brushing against skin even on warmer days. Mist rolls and thick waves, partially obscuring vision and amplifying the sense of isolation. The combination of visual, tactile, and auditory stimuli creates an immersive experience, drawing visitors into the shrine's mysterious rhythm. One hiker recounted arriving at the shrine in the pre-dawn hours. Mist curled thickly around the stones, muffling the sound of footsteps and forest life. The sounds are often indistinct, forming patterns that seem deliberate and rhythmic, echoing across the plateau and down into the surrounding valleys. Many hikers describe these whispers as overlapping, creating layers of sound that are simultaneously melodic and alien. Local legends suggest that Mistbound Shrine was once a ceremonial site used by ancient inhabitants of the Uintas. Some believe that the ghostly silhouettes are echoes of these ceremonies, bound to the stones and the mist, while the strange symbols are residual traces of energy that persist from repeated rituals. Skeptics argue that the phenomena may be natural mist, light refraction, and shadow play, but the consistent reports of figures, symbols, and whispered sounds over decades indicate that something extraordinary occurs here. Even without witnessing the full spectrum of paranormal phenomena, visitors report a profound sense of presence at Mistbound Shrine. The circle of stones seems to resonate with the surrounding forest, amplifying subtle sounds and movements. Hikers leave with a heightened sense of awareness, feeling as though they have glimpsed a hidden layer of reality, a space where past and present overlap, and where unseen forces maintain their rituals. For those who linger in the mist after dawn, the experience deepens. The combination of ghostly silhouettes, newly formed symbols, and whispers carried on the wind, creates a hypnotic, unforgettable tableau. Time seems to stretch as visitors watch movements replay endlessly, hear sounds that do not originate from any visible source, and notice symbols that vanish as mysteriously as they appear. Even after leaving the shrine, the impressions endure. The echo of gestures, the memory of strange symbols, and the haunting presence of the mist remain vivid, long after the plateau is left behind. Mist-bound Shrine remains one of the most mysterious and compelling locations in the Uintas. Its ghostly figures, ephemeral symbols, and ever-present mist transform a simple circle of stones into a space where ordinary perception is challenged. Visitors leave with the sense that the shrine is alive, their rituals continue unseen, and that the land itself retains memories older than any living generation. For those drawn to the unknown, Mist-bound Shrine offers a haunting encounter with the supernatural, a place where shadow, sound, and mist converge to create an experience that lingers long after the mountain fog has cleared. Observers report the light shifting in color from pale white to faint red, sometimes illuminating distant ledges or reflecting off the mist in ways that make the entire plateau appear surreal. The glow casts long, distorted shadows across the stones, enhancing the impression that the shrine is alive with energy. Many hikers find themselves drawn to the lights, entranced by their movement and the sense that something beyond human perception is occurring. Auditory phenomena are equally compelling. Visitors report hearing low, rhythmic chanting carried on the wind or resonating from the stones themselves. The words are indistinct, often unintelligible, but they repeat in patterns that suggest intentional recitation. Occasionally, the chanting overlaps with other subtle sounds, the scraping of stone, soft footfalls, or the rustle of garments. The combination of whispers, chants, and environmental echoes creates a layered, immersive experience. Observers often feel that the voices respond to their presence, growing stronger when attention is focused on the altar and fading when it drifts elsewhere. Local legends surrounding the shrine suggest that it was once a ceremonial site used by ancient peoples to honor spirits of the mountains, the cycles of nature, or forces beyond human understanding. Some believe the shadowy figures are echoes of these ceremonies, bound to the altar and plateau, while the flickering lights represent residual energy left behind from countless rites. The plateau feels alive with memory, each stone and crevice holding the imprint of ceremonies repeated across centuries. Some locals warn that anyone lingering too long risks becoming intimately aware of the shrine's guardians. They claim that the spirits bound to the altar continue their rites for eternity, repeating movements, chants, and gestures as they watch silently. The mist that surrounds the plateau is said to act as both barrier and veil, preventing visitors from fully grasping the scope of what occurs there. Even those who depart the shrine report an enduring impression of presence, as if the shadowy figures, flickering lights, and chanting have left an imprint on memory itself. Final Haunted Mountain Shrine remains the ultimate destination for those drawn to the supernatural. Its endless pacing figures, ritualistic energy, and ethereal illumination transform a circle of stones into a space where ordinary perception fails. Visitors leave with the feeling that the plateau is alive, that the ancient rites continue unseen, and that the land itself retains the echoes of ceremonies older than any living memory. For those brave enough to venture to its remote heights, the shrine offers a haunting encounter with the unknown, a place where shadow mist and unseen forces converge, leaving a presence that lingers long after the mountain fog has closed. Around the plateau, these are Utah's haunted mountain shrines, where dark rituals echo endlessly, shadowy figures perform impossible rites, and whispers of the past linger in the misty air. Each shrine holds the memory of forgotten ceremonies, tragic events, and spirits who cannot leave. If you ever explore these mountain shrines at night, beware. Ghostly figures may appear beside you, chants may rise with no source, and cold drafts may follow your every step. The mountains are alive with history and with spirits who linger, watching and waiting for anyone who dares enter their domain. Thank you for exploring Utah's haunted mountain shrines with me. Stay cautious, stay curious, and always respect the spirits who haunt these sacred spaces. Forever drifting, forever whispering, and forever bound to the misty peaks of the mountains.